Chapter 1451. The blood of a true god contained god power, which was the combination of heart power, energy, chi power, domain, and will. As the five-colored light continued to appear, Yi Qin's green lotus sword realm naturally broke through to the late 9th level. A huge green lotus bloomed, with patterns like the veins of the galaxy, containing endless mysteries. The breakthrough of green lotus sword domain didn't attract the slightest bit of his attention. At this moment, he felt like he was the mouth of a volcano. Inside the volcano, there was a world-destroying energy that could erupt at any time. He didn't know whether he would be burnt to ashes at the moment of eruption or whether his body would be smashed into pieces. The frequency of the five-colored light became higher and higher. When the level of the metal law reached the limit that Yi Qin could endure, a five-colored light pillar shot into the sky, covering Yi Qin. Yi Qin could not help but scream. An eternal golden light shot out of his body. It was not as dazzling as the light law, but it gave people the illusion that it would never be extinguished. It was as if this was eternity. Time had lost its meaning, and so had space. Like a god, Yi Qin's eyes had a hint of gold, and his skin was also pale gold. The martial path Yuan spirit in his body had evolved into a gold martial path Yuan spirit, without any impurities. He reached out and clenched his fist, causing the air to tremble in fear of his power. Is this the power of a demigod? Yi Qin closed his eyes and felt it carefully. The power of laws was the power of laws, and cultivation was cultivation. The feeling they brought was different. The power of laws was the use of external power, while cultivation was the power of one's own body, which was more real. Before, without using the power of laws, Yi Qin could not fly. But now, with his own power, he was floating in the air. The moment he became a beginner demigod, his soul broke through again from the middle demigod level to the high demigod level. From now on, even without the support of god blood and god power crystals, he did not need to worry about using too much power of laws and getting hurt. Because with his beginner demigod cultivation and the soul sea of a high demigod, he could use the power of laws as he pleased. Correspondingly, his soul sea could withstand higher nomological realms. Starting from absorbing the fragments of the law of metal, Yi Qin spent a mere 50 years to absorb all the remaining fragments of the law of metal, leaving nothing behind. The law of water fragment took 45 years. The law of wood fragment took 60 years. The law of fire fragment took 52 years. The law of earth fragment took 54 years. There was a metal ball the size of a longan, a seed the size of a thumb, a water ball the size of a fist, a cluster of bright flames, and an irregular piece of yellow soil floating in his soul sea. The 5 great nomological fragments were arranged in a circle, and at the center of the circle, traces of 5-colored light gathered. That was the nomological power of the 5 elements. Condense. A golden spear suddenly appeared in Yi Qin's hand. Law of metal, spear of metal. The golden spear dissipated, and Yi Qin pulled out the firmament sword, which was covered with a layer of gold. The golden spear was not necessarily in the shape of a spear. It could be in any shape, and it could also be attached to a weapon to increase its attack power. The world of metal was extremely sharp, and any object that entered the range of the world of metal would be pierced by the golden light. Even a powerful demigod might not have a higher nomological realm than me. Of course, some peak powerful demigods are not in this category, but powerful demigods have already refined godly power. In terms of overall strength, I'm definitely not a match for them. Godly power combined with nomological power is the foundation of a powerful demigod. Yi Qin was now very confident, but he also knew his limits. In front of a powerful demigod, he was still an ant. This was an indisputable fact. But in front of him, weren't high-level demigods also ants? I'll come back later to see if I can comprehend other laws. Right now, I'll go see where the Greenhoof War Saint went. The world of metal dissipated, and Yi Qin instantly turned into a man of fire. Whoosh! With a flash of fire, Yi Qin disappeared without a trace. His speed was more than 1,000 times faster than before. Among the 5 elements, the fire-traversing art was the fastest and had the most explosive power, while the water-traversing art was the fastest in water. Damn it, where's the exit? The Greenhoof War Saint had been searching for the exit for nearly 10,000 years. In his view, the entire 15th floor was like a lost world, completely isolated from the outside world. Following the edge of the wall, the Greenhoof War Saint numbly searched. After several hundred years, the Greenhoof War Saint finally saw a glimmer of light. Joy appeared in his eyes. Could it be the exit? No, that's a flame. The Greenhoof War Saint's expression changed. A moment later, a man of fire appeared in front of him. Who else could it be but Yi Chun? Sword Venerable Azure Lotus, what are you doing? The Greenhoof War Saint was a bit apprehensive. After nearly 10,000 years, Yi Chun might have comprehended the law of metal. Once the latter did so, the Greenhoof War Saint would be even less of a match. Although the Greenhoof War Saint was confident in protecting himself, the initiative was not on his side. Who knew if the other party would spend a long time exhausting him? Greenhoof War Saint, long time no see. Your luck is really bad. You still haven't found the exit. Yi Chun playfully looked at the Greenhoof War Saint as the flame on his body gradually extinguished. The Greenhoof War Saint was about to speak when he suddenly pointed at Yi Chun in shock. You've become an elementary demigod. How is this possible? Earlier, Yi Chun had turned into a man of fire and was shrouded in the law of fire. So the Greenhoof War Saint didn't notice that Yi Chun was already an elementary demigod. Now that the law of fire had dissipated, the Greenhoof War Saint finally noticed Yi Chun's cultivation. If Yi Chun had only comprehended the law of metal, the Greenhoof War Saint wouldn't be so afraid. Even if the latter was stronger than him, it wouldn't be to such an abnormal degree. As a high-rank demigod, his martial soul was almost indestructible. Unless the difference in power was too great, it would be very difficult to kill him. The only way was to exhaust him over a long period of time. However, Yi Chun had actually become an elementary demigod. With his cultivation combined with the power of laws, he was in existence close to a powerful demigod. Before this, Yi Chun was already stronger than him, but now, Swordmaster Azure Lotus, let's talk this out. There is no irreconcilable conflict between us. The Greenhoof War Saint cautiously looked at Yi Chun, ready to flee at any moment. Yi Chun shook his head. Greenhoof War Saint, I won't waste words with you. I want the god blood in your body. It's that simple, so please die. With that, Yi Chun activated the law of fire. A moment later, a terrifying world of fire spread out and enveloped the Greenhoof War Saint, turning the entire void into a furnace that burned everything. Arg! The Greenhoof War Saint screamed and became a man of fire. Then, he turned into ashes, and even his golden martial soul was no exception. Yi Chun's mastery of the law of 5 elements was very high. After absorbing all the fragments, Yi Chun could instantly kill an ordinary high-rank demigod by relying on the world of fire. Too easy. Yi Chun did not expect it to be this easy, which was a bit unexpected. Chapter 1452. Inside the world of fire, 2 objects floated in the air. One was the unrefined god blood, and the other was the storage ring. Yi Chun couldn't destroy the unrefined god blood, as it was protected by the god power. The storage ring of the ancient hoof battle saint was purposely left behind by Yi Chun. Ignoring the god blood for now, Yi Chun sucked the storage ring into his hand. Not bad. Opening the storage ring, Yi Chun revealed a faint smile. Those who came to the miracle were all experts, and those who came to the 15th floor were the experts among the experts. They had more and more symbols than ordinary people. As the only living person in the 15th floor, Yi Chun naturally obtained all the symbols. Right now, Yi Chun had collected 3 sets of golden chaos symbols, but he was still lacking 7, 8, and 9 numbers for the blue chaos symbols. These 3 blue chaos symbols should be very hard to collect. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to not have even one. Apart from the 3 sets of golden symbols, there were still thousands of duplicates of golden symbols and hundreds of duplicates of blue symbols. As long as his luck wasn't bad, he should be able to collect more. However, for Yi Chun, As long as he could collect 3 sets of golden symbols and 1 set of blue symbols, it would be a waste. Of course, he could give them to others. Putting away the storage ring, Yichen looked at the god blood. There wasn't much left, only 10% of the original amount. The rest had all been refined by the ancient hoof battle saint. However, Yichen was very satisfied. He had absorbed less than 1% of the original amount after so many years. He tried to absorb the god blood with all his might. Yichen discovered that his absorption speed was thousands of times faster than before. Even the ancient hoof battle saint couldn't compare to him. Comprehending the 5 elements brought him a huge advantage. In less than a year, Yichen had absorbed 10% of the god blood into his body. This bit of god blood should be enough for me to break through to mid-level demigod. But I have to leave some for Su Jing and Muro. Whoosh! Flames flickered as Yichen dashed in the direction of the fragment, moving as fast as lightning. First, he set his sights on the Law of Wind fragment. The firmament sword contained the Law of Wind. If he could comprehend the Law of Wind, he would be able to unleash the power of the firmament sword to a higher level. No! Yichen shook his head. Even after dozens of years, he still had no clue. The 5 elemental laws seemed to be rejecting him from comprehending other laws. No, it won't work either. It still won't work. He tried them one by one, but they all failed. Fortunately, the firmament sword had absorbed some fragments of the Law of Wind, so it was not without gains. Looks like the law fragments here are not fated with me. If I try to comprehend them forcefully, it will definitely take me a long time. Yichen decided to leave. Su Jing and Murong Qingsheng were still waiting for him. He couldn't waste any more time here. So many law of nature fragments. I happen to need the wind law of nature fragment. All of a sudden, a voice rang out. This was a heaven-defying supreme being. His speed was extremely fast, and he was clearly using the wind-walking technique. Under the same realm of laws, the wind-walking technique was even faster than the fire-walking technique. If it was in the past, Yichen would definitely kill the other party, but now he just shook his head and used the fire-walking technique, disappearing without a trace. Killing a heaven-defying supreme was not beneficial to him. He already had all the benefits he deserved. So fast. This supreme who comprehended the law of wind was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. He originally thought that apart from the 5 supremes and the peak mid-level demigods, he should be invincible. But that person's speed was too terrifying, more than 1,000 times faster than him. He must have absorbed the fire law of nature fragment. As long as I absorb the wind law of nature fragment, I shouldn't be inferior to him. This person thought to himself. Yichen's speed was many times faster than the ancient hoof war saint, and his speed in finding the exit was also many times faster. After 800 years, Yichen finally found the exit. This exit was very small, and if one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't notice it at all. Compared to the vast 15th floor, it was the size of a needle. It made people speechless. After leaving the 15th floor, Yichen directly came to the surface. No matter how small a mosquito's leg is, it's still meat. The world of water filled the air, and all the moisture in the air became Yichen's eyes. Yichen discovered that there were still many palaces that had not been opened, and there were definitely divine force crystals and law fragments inside. At present, it was still a bit difficult for Su Jing and Murong Qingsheng to absorb the divine blood, so divine force crystals were just right for them. Just like this, after another 500 years, Yichen swept through the divine ruin and obtained more than 10,000 divine force crystals. He also absorbed some law of 5 elements fragments. The only pity was that he couldn't absorb the other law fragments, nor could he take them away. Time ago, turning into a fiery light, Yichen flew out of the divine ruin. When he first came to the primal chaos battlefield, Yichen felt that flying speed was too slow. It would take at least a year to cross a domain, but now, Yichen only needed 2 hours to cross a domain. After searching one domain after another, Yichen finally found news about Su Jing. There was a city in the 9 domains called Celestial Wolf City, which was built by the Celestial Wolf Battle Sage. There were many cities like this in other domains. In the years that Yi Chun had been in the Divine Ruin, the primal chaos continent had changed a lot. Gangs and all kinds of forces had sprung up like bamboo shoots after a rain. Celestial Wolf City was the #1 force in the 9 domains. Living in Celestial Wolf City required paying 10 million yuan stones every year. In addition, one had to work for Celestial Wolf City. Near Celestial Wolf City, there was a rich mine that produced chaos stones. Chaos stones were a type of cultivation stone that was of a higher grade than yuan stones and were used for demigods to cultivate. Demigods would need a much longer time to break through if they relied on yuan stones alone. Generally, yuan stones were used to replenish consumption or to set up formations. For example, Celestial Wolf City was filled with all kinds of formations and restrictions. Big sister, why don't we leave Celestial Wolf City and go to other domains? Within an ordinary-looking palace in Celestial Wolf City, there were hundreds of female paragons and 10 or so female demigods gathered. The female demigod in the lead was a peerlessly beautiful woman with very long legs. She wore a long black dress, and just by sitting there, she was extremely graceful, making it impossible for others to look away even if they wanted to. Hundred Blossom Hall was a small force attached to Celestial Wolf City. It was made up entirely of women, and the hall master was the Black Flower Battle Sage. She was definitely the #1 beauty in Celestial Wolf City. This kind of beauty was not just in appearance, but also in spirit. You guys are too naive. Celestial Wolf City is the #1 force in the 9 domains, and the Celestial Wolf Battle Sage is the #1 expert in the 9 domains. Even if we escape to other domains, he will not let us go. He might even implicate you guys. Moreover, whether or not we can leave Celestial Wolf City is another matter altogether. Black Flower Battle Sage shook her head helplessly. She had already prepared to sacrifice herself to the Celestial Wolf Battle Sage. Resistance would not help and would only bring disaster to Hundred Blossom Hall. As she spoke, Black Flower Battle Sage glanced at the sisters present. These were all sisters she had met in the Primal Chaos battlefield. There were demigods, heaven-defying paragons, quasi-demigods, and ordinary paragons. Among the large number of paragons was Su Jing. Chapter 1453. Su Jing looked at the Black Flower Battle Saint with a complicated expression. Her elder sister had always treated them well. Without her, Su Jing didn't think she could have lived peacefully until now. Of course, her elder sister also had a domineering side. She made them hand over all their storage rings and saint weapons. Naturally, Su Jing's Sky Saint armor and weapons were all handed over to her. Su Jing didn't hold a grudge. She couldn't keep the Sky Saint weapon with her. Once it was leaked, it would be taken away sooner or later, and she might even be killed. Therefore, when the Black Flower Battle Sage was in trouble, Su Jingting wanted to help him. Unfortunately, with her own strength, she could not help him at all. Ordinary Supreme Beings were the lowest group in the Primal Chaos battlefield. They could not even protect themselves. If Yi Chun were here, he should be able to help. Unconsciously, Su Jing thought of Yi Chun. In her heart, Yi Chun was omnipotent. When Yi Chun had just arrived at the Chaos battlefield, he might only be able to contend against a primary demigod. However, after 20,000 years, Yi Chun must have made great progress. Su Jing firmly believed that. Haha, a Black Flower Battle Saint. Have you thought it through? I, the Heavenly Wolf Battle Saint, don't like to force people, but I won't give you too much time to think. Outside the palace, a large amount of black smoke condensed, forming a tall figure. The figure had a third eye on his forehead, flickering with a frightening cold light. The Heavenly Wolf Battle Saint, the #1 expert of the 9 regions, was a peak mid-level demigod. Soon, the Black Flower Battle Saint walked out of the palace with a group of sisters. The Black Flower Battle Saint floated up, her long black dress like a black curtain, accentuating her snow-white skin. Heavenly Wolf Battle Saint, I am willing to be your woman. The Black Flower Battle Saint nodded. Good, Black Flower Battle Saint, you are very wise. I am very happy. The Heavenly Wolf Battle Saint revealed a smile, and his frightening aura gradually eased. Looking at the Heavenly Wolf Battle Saint, the Black Flower Battle Saint continued. but I have a request. Speak. The Hundred Flowers Hall is my faction. You can restrict my freedom, but you cannot restrict their freedom. Glancing at the people of Hundred Blossom Hall, the Heavenly Wolf Battle Saint flatly refused. No, since you are my woman, then Hundred Blossom Hall belongs to my Heavenly Wolf City. They must listen to my orders. How can they act freely? The Heavenly Wolf Battle Saint had always been domineering. He only needed people to obey him, not conditions. As the two of them were negotiating, in the distance of Celestial Wolf City, a streak of fiery light was rapidly approaching. In the blink of an eye, it was still 1,000 miles away, but in the blink of an eye, it was already right in front of them. It was the blue-robed Yichun. This is Tianlang City. Yichun sized up the huge city in front of him. This huge city was extremely majestic and domineering. Above the city gates, there were 3 large words, Heavenly Wolf City. It clearly contained a domineering martial will that could be seen and felt from far away. Activating the law of water, the water vapor in the air instantly became Yichun's eyes. He could clearly see the inside of Tianlang City. The countless arrays and restrictions were useless before the law of water. Soon, a smile appeared on Yichun's face. He had discovered Su Jing. Whoosh! Transforming into a streak of fiery light, Yichun instantly passed through the arrays and restrictions of Tianlang City and arrived in the sky above the Hundred Flowers Hall. Su Jing. The flames were extinguished, and Yichun slowly spoke. It was Yichun's voice. Su Jing hurriedly raised her head and saw the blue-robed Yichun. Tears immediately blurred her eyes, and the longing in her heart reached its peak at this moment. She could no longer control herself. In the next moment, the two of them hugged each other tightly, completely ignoring the existence of everyone else. Who is this? He should be little sister Su Jing's man. He looks quite powerful. How can a heaven-defying supremacy who has comprehended the law of fire not be powerful? But he's too reckless. This is Tianlang City. Isn't he afraid of offending the Heavenly Wolf Battle Saint by acting like this in front of him? I hope nothing happens to him. The Sisters of the Hundred Flowers Hall discussed animatedly. Even the Heavenly Wolf Battle Saint and the Black Flower Battle Saint looked over. Letting go of Su Jing's body, Yichun stared into her eyes and said warmly, "You've worked hard all these years. In the future, I will never let you suffer again." Yichun noticed that Su Jing was not wearing a Heavenly Saint artifact armor. It was not difficult to imagine that many things must have happened in the past. It was already a blessing in disguise that the two of them could meet again. For a moment, Yichun was a little annoyed with himself. He should not have comprehended the law of metal and wasted nearly 10,000 years. However, Yichun did not seriously consider it. If he had not comprehended the law of metal, he would not have become an elementary demigod and would not have found the exit so quickly. It should be known that the ancient Hoof Battle Saint had also searched for the exit for nearly 10,000 years. If Yichun had not become an elementary demigod, he might not have found the exit even now, wasting even more time. Covering Yichun's mouth, Su Jing said, "It's already heaven's blessing that we can meet. At least, I waited until you came. By the way, have you found little sister Qingsheng?" Su Jing suddenly asked. Yichun's face darkened. Shaking his head, he said, "Not yet. I will accompany you to look for her. Don't worry too much. I think little sister Qingsheng should be waiting for you, just like me." And Yichun nodded. A cold light flickered in the Heavenly Wolf Battle Saint's eyes. These two were too presumptuous. They did not even take him seriously. Moreover, this heaven-defying sovereign dared to fly above Heavenly Wolf City. He deserved to die 1,000 times over. With a cold snort, the Heavenly Wolf Battle Saint's right hand suddenly grabbed at Yichun and Su Jing, turning into a giant hand of black smoke along the way. In his eyes, the so-called heaven-defying sovereigns were just ants. Only the 5 sovereigns could fight him. Scram! Yichun tilted his head and smashed the giant hand of black smoke with a fire fist. Finally, it landed heavily on the Heavenly Wolf Battle Saint's chest. With a sweep of flames, the Heavenly Wolf Battle Saint's chest was almost penetrated. His body was charred black and smoking. His appearance was so miserable that everyone was dumbfounded. What? He is an elementary demigod. An elementary demigod who has comprehended the law. He is not a heaven-defying sovereign. Terrifying. The heavenly wolf battle saint was seriously injured with one punch. The sky of the 9 regions is going to change. I didn't expect little sister Su Jing's man to be so powerful. He could be said to be invincible. The sisters of the 100 Blossom Hall were both shocked and envious. The one whose expression changed the most was the Hall Master of the 100 Blossom Hall, the Black Flower Battle Saint. Little sister Su Jing usually kept a low profile, but no one expected her to have such a powerful background. Oh no, little sister Su Jing's Heavenly Saint artifact was still in her possession. Although she had willingly given it to her, her man might not think the same way. Even a fool would know that little sister Su Jing's Heavenly Saint artifact was given to her by her man. How could an ordinary person possess a Heavenly Saint artifact? The Black Flower Battle Saint panicked. My lord, I have offended you just now. I deserve to die. Please spare my life. The Heavenly Wolf Battle Saint was severely injured. More than half of his gold martial primordial spirit had been destroyed. However, at this moment, he had no other thoughts. All he wanted was to survive. Su Jing, how do you think we should deal with him? Yichen looked at Su Jing. If Su Jing wanted him to kill, he would kill. If Su Jing wanted him to release, he would release. Chapter 1454. Su Jing looked at Celestial Wolf Battle Saint. Celestial Wolf Battle Saint also looked at Su Jing and begged for mercy. If you are willing to let me go, I am willing to hand over all my savings. Celestial Wolf City is also yours. Kill him, Su Jing said coldly. She would never forget how Celestial Wolf Battle Saint killed 3 sisters of 100 Flower Hall. One of the sisters had been with her for more than 20,000 years, and they were as close as sisters. Bitch, I will make you wish you were dead. Boom! His body exploded into black smoke. When he reappeared, Celestial Wolf Battle Saint was already very far away. He was a life form of the Dark Fog universe and could naturally transform into Dark Fog. You think you can escape? Yichen casually threw another fiery fist at Celestial Wolf Battle Saint. This time, the might of the fiery fist was more than 10,000 times greater, and it was billions of times more dazzling than a comet. In an instant, it streaked across the sky and landed on the Heavenly Wolf Battle Saint. In the next moment, the Heavenly Wolf Battle Saint's entire body exploded and turned into ashes. The dazzling light illuminated the entire Heavenly Wolf City. Celestial Wolf Battle Saint is dead? Who killed him? He's so strong. Not even the 5 Supremes could kill Celestial Wolf Battle Saint. Unless it was Supremacy Een, one of the original 5 Supremes, and the current Yin-Yang Battle Saint. Almost everyone in Celestial Wolf City saw the scene just now and was shocked. Invincible, peerless, Black Flower Battle Saint's heart was touched. Yichen gave her many feelings. He was mysterious, powerful, gentle, considerate, and at the same time, indescribably domineering. Compared to Celestial Wolf Battle Saint, Yichen was undoubtedly more attractive. Celestial Wolf Battle Saint used his heart to conquer women, while Celestial Wolf Battle Saint used his strength to conquer women. Sister Love Flower, rest in peace. Revenge has been taken. Su Jing thought to herself. Su Jing, who are they? Yichen looked at Black Flower Battle Saint and the others. Su Jing introduced. Big Sister is the Hall Master of 100 Flower Hall, Black Flower Battle Saint. She treats us very well. The rest are Sisters of 100 Flower Hall. Black Flower Battle Sage, thank you for taking care of Su Jing for so long. Let me give you a little gift. I hope you won't mind. Yichen waved his right hand, and hundreds of dazzling specks of light entered the Black Flower Battle Saint's body. These specks of light were the crystallization of divinity. Yichen was able to conceal the radiance of the crystallization of divinity with the help of the laws of 5 elements and his cultivation as an elementary demigod, making it less conspicuous. Yichen also concealed the radiance of the crystallization of divinity. Yichen did not wish for the Black Flower Battle Saint to be killed or be targeted by others because of the crystallization of divinity. Just as the Black Flower Battle Saint was about to refuse, a look of surprise flashed across her eyes. It was a divine power crystal. A single divine power crystal could save a demigod 10,000 years of cultivation. 100 divine power crystals could save at least 1,000,000 years of cultivation. Thank you. The Black Flower Battle Saint revealed a grateful expression, then looked at Su Jing. With a wave of her hand, 3 objects flew towards Su Jing. They were the Sky Saint armor, a Sky Saint weapon, and a storage ring. Sister, these are your things. I'll return them to you. Sister, you won't blame me for taking your things, right? The Black Flower Battle Saint was a bit ashamed. Taking the Sky Saint weapon and the storage ring, Su Jing said in a gentle voice, "How could I? Without you, it would still be a problem for me to live. I believe the sisters of 100 Flower Hall all think the same. Without the Black Flower Battle Saint, there would be no 100 Flower Hall. Without the 100 Flower Hall, everyone would have no home, no power to protect them. Compared to their lives, what were external objects worth?" The next day, Yi Chun and Su Jing left the Sky Wolf City. The Sky Wolf Battle Saint has quite a lot of treasures. Regarding the Sky Wolf Battle Saint savings, Yi Chun naturally wouldn't be lenient. He took everything he wanted, leaving nothing behind. Even the majority of the Chaos Gem mines near the Sky Wolf City were dug out by Yi Chun and stored in the 5-element space. After comprehending the 5 elements, Yi Chun could open up a 5-element space in the Chaos battlefield. This 5-element space was extremely stable and wouldn't be shattered by the primal chaos principle. The 5-element space was inside Yi Chun's body, which was equivalent to a mobile storage ring. However, the space inside was much higher than that of a storage ring. It was completely suitable for living beings to live inside, no different from the real world. In the 5-element space, a chain of mines stretched as far as the eye could see. In the depths of mines, there was a paradise filled with birdsong, fragrant flowers, waterfalls, and countless beautiful sceneries. Su Jing sat cross-legged on a piece of flat land, diligently cultivating. With a large amount of divine power crystals, Su Jing could make great progress at every moment. After all, even if her cultivation base was low, her progress was fast. Leaving the 9 regions, Yi Chun arrived at the 8 regions. Yi Chun discovered that the higher the ranking, the more powerful experts there were, and the more treasures there were. There were all kinds of different forces, enough to make one dizzy. In order to search for Murong Qingcheng, Yi Chun controlled a large number of forces and had them help him search. He understood that there was strength in numbers. For a moment, Yi Chun's name resounded. Everyone in the top-ranked regions knew of the Green Lotus Sword Saint, who possessed peerless martial strength. Even the 5 Great Supremes were not his opponent. Lord Sword Saint, the 7 regions don't have the person you speak of. Lord Sword Saint, the 14 regions don't have the person you speak of. Lord Sword Saint, although Yi Chun had searched in other regions before, at that time, his strength wasn't very strong, and there were more or less mistakes. This time, Yi Chun ordered all the forces to turn the entire primal chaos continent upside down. Not a single place was left unchecked. One region. This was the only place that Yi Chun's forces did not dare to set foot in. This was because there was also a peerless expert here, the Yin Yang Battle Saint. The Yin Yang Battle Saint was originally one of the 5 Great Supremes. He was called Supremacy Yin, and his strength was comparable to Supremacy Light. However, by chance, not only did Supremacy Yin become a primary demigod, but he also comprehended another type of nomological law, the Yang nomological law. His strength was earth-shattering, and no one was his opponent. Yin Yang City was the Yin Yang Battle Saint's force, and it was the only force in this region. Yin Yang City's main palace. In the spacious and deep palace, the Yin Yang Battle Saint opened his eyes. Is he finally here? Even from far away, he could feel Yi Chun's aura. This aura was something that only he could feel because they were experts of the same level. I'm so excited. I finally have an opponent. The Yin Yang Battle Saint's figure flashed and turned into a white stream of air. His speed was not any slower than Yi Chun's. From afar, the two of them saw each other. Yin-Yang Battle Saint, Green Lotus Sword Saint. The two of them introduced each other. I'm looking for someone. I hope you can cooperate. Yi Chen said, I'm happy to cooperate, but the premise is that you can survive my attack. If you die, there's no need for me to cooperate. The Yin-Yang Battle Saint smiled, and his battle-intense sword. Yi Chen frowned slightly, but he quickly relaxed. Okay, as you wish. Days without an opponent were very boring. Yi Chen also wanted to know how strong the Yin-Yang Battle Saint, who had comprehended 2 top nomological laws, was and how he compared his own 5 elemental laws. Straightforward, as expected of an expert who has reached this level. The Yin-Yang Battle Saint nodded in satisfaction. Chapter 1455. Let's end this quickly. Yi Chen pulled out the firmament sword, which was covered with a faint 5-colored airflow. The 5 elements reinforced and restrained each other. Metal gave birth to water, water gave birth to wood gave birth to fire, fire gave birth to earth, and earth gave birth to metal. When the 5 elements gathered, the power circulated endlessly and complemented each other. Its power was many times stronger than a single basic law. It could be said that when Yi Chen went all out, no advanced demigod would be a match for Yi Chen as long as he did not comprehend a law. Yi Chen did not go all out to kill the Green Hoof Battle Saint. He only used the law of fire. Of course, the Green Hoof Battle Saint was at the bottom of the advanced demigods. After all, he had just become an advanced demigod. The law of the 5 elements, not bad. The Yin-Yang Battle Saint laughed, and a hammer appeared in his hand. Black and white airflow circled around the hammer, combining strength and softness. Let's fight. Yi Chen carried his sword and rushed toward the Yin-Yang Battle Saint. Good timing. The Yin-Yang Battle Saint met him head-on. Clang! The firmament sword and the hammer collided, producing an earth-shattering sound. The sky above the domain first changed from black and white, then the 5-colored airflow filled the air. The next moment, chaotic light exploded, as if the world was born. Yi Chen and the Yin-Yang Battle Saint were both sent flying. The ground below them continued to sink, extending endlessly. So terrifying. What level of battle is this? It has such powerful destructive power. The experts living in the domain were stunned. The material of the chaotic battlefield was very hard. They could not destroy it on a large scale, even if they tried their best. However, the battle between the two had spread thousands of miles. This was a scene of destruction. Awesome, Yin-Yang world. The Yin-Yang Battle Saint's body shook. Black and white airflow spread out, shrouding Yi Chen. 5 elements world. A 5-colored airflow burst out from Yi Chen's body. Boom, 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 boom. The Yin-Yang world and the 5 elements world continued to collide, neither giving way. Every time the 2 worlds collided, a large expanse of chaotic light sputtered. Wherever the 2 worlds hit, that place would disappear completely. Concealment. Suddenly, Yin-Yang Battle Saint disappeared. When he reappeared, he was behind Yi Chen. As if struck by lightning, Yi Chen's entire body was sent flying. Fortunately, he had the 5-element world and the Xian Wu's sacred armor to protect him, so the Yin-Yang Battle Saint's hammer didn't kill him. He was only lightly injured. Whoosh! Transforming into a man of fire, Yi Chen counterattacked the Yin-Yang Battle Saint. However, the Yin-Yang Battle Saint, who had transformed into a white stream of air, was no slower than Yi Chen and was even more agile. You're no match for me, the Yin-Yang Battle Saint asked. That's not necessarily true. The flames on Yi Chen's body suddenly surged and faintly glowed green. Correspondingly, Yi Chen's speed also surged. Clang, clang, clang. Yi Chen slashed at the Yin-Yang Battle Saint 3 times, sending him into the ground. Wood gave birth to fire. The fire-traveling technique, combined with the verdant wood body, would make the flames more vigorous and faster. Again, the Yin-Yang Battle Saint broke out of the ground and attacked Yi Chen. The two fought from day to night and from night to day. They fought for 7 days and 7 nights, but neither of them was able to determine a winner. The surrounding area was a mess. Green Lotus Sword Saint, if you can take my hammer, I promise to cooperate with you to find him. The yin-yang battle, Saint raised the hammer in his hand. Black and white light flowed on the hammer, becoming neither black nor white. Gradually, it turned gray, a terrifying gray. The power of the yin and yang laws. Yin-yang battle Saint was the same as Yi-chun. Neither of them could fuse the laws together, which was something only true gods could do. However, there was nothing absolute in this world. Their seas of soul actually had the power of fusing laws, which was formed naturally. It was like putting black water and white water together. They would naturally fuse, and it was not something that could be controlled. Come! The five-colored stream of air disappeared from the firmament sword in Yi Chen's hand and was replaced by a dazzling five-colored light. The power of the five elements laws. Boom! The entire area shook, and a huge crater appeared in the center. Violent, chaotic shockwaves radiated in all directions with the two of them at the center. Countless experts could not escape in time and were annihilated by the chaotic shockwaves. A thick layer of the ground was also shaved off by the chaotic shockwaves. This was a battle of the pinnacle, a battle that ordinary demigods could not imagine. The power of the yin-yang laws and the five elements laws could already rival ordinary powerful demigods to a certain extent. It was just that it could not last for long. About 1/3 of it has been used. In Yi Chen's sea of soul, 1/3 of the five-colored light between the five elements laws had disappeared. This made Yi Chen's heart ache. It would take a long time to accumulate the power again. In the future, unless it was absolutely necessary, he would use the power of the five elements laws less. Haha, this is great, this is great. The yin-yang battle, Saint put away his hammer and laughed out loud. Yin-yang battle Saint, I don't know if you will keep your word. Yi Chen was still wary of the yin-yang battle Saint. If the other party did not cooperate, there was nothing he could do. Don't worry, I will keep my word. The yin-yang battle, Saint immediately ordered people to find out about Murong Qingcheng. 1 month later, I'm sorry, there is no one you're looking for, and there is no news about her. The yin-yang battle, Saint shook his head. There is no one. In fact, during this period of time, Yi Chun had also been searching in the first domain. Through the water world, he could explore a large area at once. Unfortunately, Murong Qingcheng was indeed not in the first domain, and there was no news about her. Could she be in the chaotic sea? Yi Chen's expression was a bit ugly. The chaotic sea was boundless, and it was many times larger than the chaotic continent. Searching for her by himself was undoubtedly like looking for a needle in a haystack. Is this person very important to you? The yin-yang battle Saint asked. Yi Chen nodded. Very important. You can go to the chaotic forest or the chaotic mountain range to search, the yin-yang battle Saint suggested. The chaotic continent was very large, and the 99 domains were only a relatively safe area. The chaotic forest and the chaotic mountain range were much more dangerous. Chaotic creatures roamed freely inside, and there were even level 7 and level 8 creatures. It was not impossible for level 9 creatures to appear. All right, then I will take my leave. Yi Chen planned to wait a little longer. If there was no news of Murong Qingcheng in the 99 domains, he was prepared to enter the chaotic forest and chaotic mountain range to search for Murong Qingcheng. He believed that with his strength, there should not be too much danger. Be careful. I have been to the chaotic forest a few times, and it gives me a very dangerous feeling. You should know what a place that can make me feel dangerous means. The yin-yang battle, Saint reminded Yi Chun. Understood. Thank you for the reminder. A place that could make the yin-yang battle Saint feel dangerous was definitely not an ordinary place. There must be level 8 creatures, or even a level 8 king of chaotic creatures. If he encountered a level 9 creature, he could only resign himself to fate. A level 9 creature was an existence comparable to a powerful demigod. It was not something that the current Yi Chun could contend with. Chapter 1456. It was one thing for his subordinates to search for him and another thing for himself. After spending 10 years, Yi Chun had searched all 99 domains of the chaotic continent. Unfortunately, there was no sign of Murong Qingcheng. There were only 2 explanations for this situation. First, Morong Qingsheng was already dead. Second, Morong Qingsheng wasn't in the 99 domains. Yichen hoped it was the latter. Since he had searched all 99 domains, Yichen could only place his target on the chaotic forest and chaotic mountain range. First was the chaotic forest. The chaotic forest was located on the west side of the chaotic continent. Its area was larger than all 99 domains combined. The chaotic forest was shrouded in fog all day. Unless one reached the level of Yi Chun or the Yinyang Battle Saint, not many dared to enter. In the five-element space, Su Jing was still cultivating. Yi Chun didn't hesitate and entered the chaotic forest. So quiet. Once he entered the chaotic forest, Yi Chun felt like he had entered another world. His soul force swept out, and everything was covered in fog. A world of water filled the air, and the reflected images were distorted. The chaotic forest had its own set of laws that could distort Yi Chun's law of water. Traveling through the forest, Yi Chun felt a bit depressed. The chaotic forest was a world of its own. The trees were so tall that they reached the clouds. Each tree was several miles or even dozens of miles thick. An extremely dense vitality was emitted, forming a fog. Si. Just as Yi Chun passed by a large tree, a large head bit over. A fishy smell assaulted his nose, making Yi Chun feel slightly disgusted. The five-element space spread out and blocked the bite. Yi Chun couldn't help but look at the large tree. A green python that was several hundred meters thick coiled around the tree. At first glance, one would think it was a giant vine. 8th level chaos creature, chaos poison python. 8th level chaos creatures were equivalent to high-level demigods. However, any 8th level chaos creature was stronger than normal high-level demigods because they were born with the power of laws. For example, the chaos poison python was born with the law of poison. Although the level of the law of poison wasn't high, it was very threatening. As long as one wasn't a powerful demigod, one bite would definitely kill them. As expected of the chaos forest, Yi Chun did not dare to be careless. He had never fought with a level 8 chaos creature before, so he did not know how strong the other party was. Once it missed its target, the chaos poisonous python opened its mouth and spat out a purple whirlwind. This purple whirlwind was extremely smelly, as if it was made up of all the stinkiest things in the world. Just one whiff of it would make one feel as if they would fall into hell and never be able to reincarnate. Instead of dodging the purple whirlwind, Yi Chun activated the 5 elemental laws. The 5 elemental world expanded ferociously. Not only did it disperse the purple whirlwind, it even struck the chaos poison python's body. The primal chaos venomous python was sent flying away along with the tree that was wrapped around it. Not bad, but not my match. Yi Chun reckoned that level 8 chaos creatures should be equivalent to relatively powerful high-level demigods. Some of the stronger ones were equivalent to top-notch high-level demigods. A level 8 king of chaos creatures was equivalent to a peak high-level demigod. Although the chaotic forest was large, Yi Chun's scouting speed was fast. After 200 years, Yi Chun had already explored most of the chaotic forest and fought with countless chaotic life forms. There were level 6 chaos creatures, level 7 chaos creatures, and level 8 chaos creatures. There was even a level 8 king of chaos creatures. A level 8 king of chaos creatures was only slightly weaker than Yi Chun. The power of laws it contained was very dense, and it was hard to kill. After 300 years, Yi Chun had searched the entire chaotic forest once, but he still couldn't find any trace of Morong Qingqing. Thinking about it, in such a harsh situation, even Supremes couldn't survive, and even demigods couldn't survive. What Yi Chun didn't know was that there was a place deep in the chaotic forest that he hadn't explored yet. The fog, there was 100 times thicker than other places. The strangest thing was that the fog could reflect light. If one didn't enter it, they wouldn't be able to notice this place, and it was very easy to overlook. In the thick fog, there was a black monster the size of a mountain lying there sleeping. The air it exhaled was the fog. Chaotic mountain range. Although he knew that it was unlikely for Murong Qingsheng to be in the chaotic forest or chaotic mountain range, Yichen still wanted to look for her. Compared to the chaotic forest, the chaotic mountain range was much hotter. There was plenty of light, and there were fewer chaotic creatures here. After 150 years, Yichun arrived at the depths of the chaotic mountain range. So hot, Yichun discovered that the closer he got to the depths of the chaotic mountain range, the hotter the temperature became. This kind of temperature was no longer a normal temperature. It was a temperature that could annihilate a demigod. Gradually, the scarlet-red ground was replaced by a magma lake. This was an incomparably huge magma lake. It was blood-red in color, and endless flames were spewing out from the magma lake, forming boundless waves of fire. The five elements world unfolded, and Yichen passed through the waves of fire. It's impossible for anyone to be here. It seems like Murong Qingsheng isn't in the primal chaos continent. While heaving a sigh of relief, Yichun began to worry. If Murong Qingsheng wasn't in the primal chaos continent, where could she be? He continued to search carefully. Yichun didn't want to let go of any possibility. Unknowingly, Yichun arrived at the center of the magma lake. The temperature here was already close to the limit of a mid-level demigod. Only high-level demigods could fly here and not get hurt. He didn't know if it was Yi Chen's illusion, but Yi Chen vaguely sensed that a terrifying crisis was approaching. Rumble! Just as Yi Chen raised his guard, a monstrous wave of fire soared into the sky. Accompanying the wave of fire was a blood-red dragon. This dragon was too big, estimated to be thousands of miles long. In the primal chaos battlefield, an honorable could only maintain the figure of an ordinary person and couldn't change too much. Even a demigod could only change a little. Therefore, the bigger the body, the stronger the strength of the chaos creature. A chaos creature that was thousands of miles long was definitely not as simple as a level 8 chaos creature. It was also unlikely that it was the king of level 8 chaos creatures. After taking a closer look, Yichen couldn't help but be shocked. Level 9 chaos creature, Chaos Fire Dragon. A level 9 chaos creature was comparable to a powerful demigod. This was definitely not something that Yi Chun could contend with. Run! Without any other thoughts, Yi Chun used the fire travel technique and fled frantically. Roar! The Chaos Fire Dragon roared into the sky, and the terrifying sound wave quickly caught up with Yi Chun. Yi Chun felt as if his soul was about to float away, and his entire body fell uncontrollably into the magma lake. Too strong. Is this the power of a level 9 chaos creature? Yi Chun was shocked. He didn't stop using the fire travel technique and shuttled through the magma lake. As the magma lake was formed by the convergence of flames, the speed of using the fire travel technique was even faster. However, the Chaos Fire Dragon was even faster. In a short while, it caught up with Yi Chun and clawed at him. Bang! The magma lake shook, and Yi Chun, who had turned into a flaming man, exploded. Fortunately, he quickly condensed his body and continued to flee. I can't stop. Yi Chun felt the crisis of death. He had used the power of the 5 elemental laws just now. If it was just a fire travel technique, he would have been killed. Chapter 1457. 5 Elemental Fire Escape. With no other choice, Yi Chun used the 5 elemental laws again. His body emitted a hazy rainbow light, and his speed increased by 10 times. In a flash, he was 10,000 miles away. The Chaos Fire Dragon did not give up. It turned into a fire dragon and chased after him. Its fire traveling technique was no lower than Yi Chen's, but it was not as good as the 5 elemental fire escape. After 10 minutes, Yi Chun completely lost the Chaos Fire Dragon and came to the edge of the chaotic mountain range. That was close. Letting out a heavy breath, Yi Chun still had some lingering fear in his heart. Level 9 creatures were too strong. There was no way to fight back. Only the merged laws could be relied on. The 5 elemental laws have been used up. It's not going to take risks now. Looking at his sea of soul, there was only a faint trace of the rainbow light between the 5 elemental laws. After all, the power of 5 elemental laws was not fused by Yi Chun. It was formed naturally, and its quantity was limited. If Yi-Chun had fused the 5 elemental laws on his own initiative, then the power of 5 elemental laws would be practically limitless, just like how he could use fire and water elemental laws. Green Lotus Sword Saint, I plan to go to the Scarlet Continent. Are you interested? On this day, the Yin-Yang battle Saint suddenly came to visit. Scarlet Continent? Yi-Chun had never heard of it before. The Yin-Yang battle Saint smiled. It seems that you haven't heard of the Scarlet Continent. That's right, most people haven't. Let me explain. Those who come to the chaotic battlefield all want to enter the legendary Heaven Realm and continue cultivating. Those who are not strong enough can only rely on luck. For example, gathering all the gold chaos symbols, and blue chaos symbols. But for the two of us, our strength is enough. In fact, as long as we have the strength of a high-level demigod, we are qualified to enter the Heaven Realm. We don't need the gold chaos symbols or the blue chaos symbols. Oh, I see. This was the first time Yi-Chun had heard of it. The Yin-Yang battle sage continued. In order to enter the Heaven Realm, we must reach the Crimson Continent. The Primal Chaos Talisman is actually a one-time use space-time teleportation talisman. However, it is passive and will only activate after 100,000 years. With the strength of the two of us, we can definitely pass through the Sea of Chaos and reach the Crimson Continent by ourselves. What kind of place is the Scarlet Continent? Yi-Chun asked. The Crimson Continent is the place closest to the Heaven Realm. As it is close to the Heaven Realm, it is extremely fertile. There are countless treasures and opportunities. Some lucky people might appear on the Crimson Continent when they first arrive at the Primal Chaos battlefield. The person you're looking for might also be on the Crimson Continent. The Yin-Yang battle Saint explained. How far is the Crimson Continent from the Chaos mainland? Yi-Chun was tempted. The Chaos Ocean was boundless. If he was unlucky, he might not be able to find anyone in the Chaos Ocean even after 10 million years. He might as well go to the Crimson Continent to search. If he was not on the Crimson Continent, he could just leave the Crimson Continent and continue searching. If he could find him, everyone would be happy, and he could stay on the Crimson Continent. I don't know about this. I only know that the Scarlet Continent is in the east of the Primal Chaos Continent. Yin-Yang battle Saint shook his head. All right, let's set off as soon as possible. Yi-Chun did not want to waste a single moment. No problem, we can set off tomorrow. The Yin-Yang battle Saint smiled. The Chaos Ocean was full of dangers. Although he had the strength to look down on high-level demigods, he could not guarantee that he could reach the Crimson Continent safely. However, with the addition of Yi-Chun, the danger would be much lower. If the two of them worked together, they could even last a few rounds against ordinary, powerful demigods. The next day, the two of them set off. Very few people knew about this. With the departure of the two of them, the Primal Chaos Continent was destined to be chaotic once again. Previously, with the two of them around, many major forces did not dare to act recklessly, afraid of angering the two of them. The Chaos Ocean was turbulent, as if there was no end to it. Green Lotus Sword Saint, this is the divine wine that I personally brewed. Try it. While flying at high speed, the Yin-Yang battle Saint tossed a wine gourd to Yi-Chun. Taking the wine gourd, Yi-Chun took a sip. Good wine. As soon as the wine entered his stomach, Yi-Chun felt warm all over his body. It should be known that at his current realm, there were very few wines that could make him feel this way. Correspondingly, the wine that could make him feel this way must be extraordinary. The Yin-Yang battle Saint said proudly, I spent 1,000 years brewing this divine wine. There are only 10 gourds. Give me another gourd. Yi-Chun smacked his lips. This one was really good. If you want it, exchange it with something. The Yin-Yang battle Saint rolled his eyes at Yi-Chun. Did he really think that divine wine was cabbages? He could brew it, but the materials were difficult to find. At most, I'll help you find the materials. Yi-Chun laughed. After spending some time together, the two of them were considered familiar and appreciated each other. Wait until you find a person. The two of them chatted as they flew toward the east. In the far east, there was a Crimson Continent. Although it was called a continent, it was very high above sea level. The edge of the continent adjacent to the coast was clearly covered with cliffs. In the middle of the Crimson Continent was a river. This river was very long and just happened to divide the continent into two. The continent on the left was very bright, with a clear sky. The continent on the right was shrouded in darkness. In the corner of the continent on the left, there were many ancient-looking castles standing there. In one of the castles, a beautiful woman was meditating. In front of her was an incense burner. The incense burner emitted a fragrance that made people feel relaxed and happy. The speed of thinking naturally increased by 100 or even 1,000 times, which was very beneficial to cultivation. Sister Morong, this year's ancient fragrance pill is here. This is yours. A beautiful woman in a light yellow dress walked in and handed a pill to the woman. Thank you, sister. The woman opened her eyes, a smile on her face. The woman was Murong Chincheng. Her cultivation was many times higher than when she entered the primal chaos battlefield. She was already at the peak of legend rank. It is said that next year, our ancient fragrance castle will have an important person descend to select outstanding talents to be groomed. Sister Murong has improved so quickly, you might have a chance to be chosen. The beautiful woman said enviously. Murong Chincheng shook her head. I don't want to be chosen. The less trouble, the better. Why? The beautiful woman felt a little strange. I'm waiting for someone. Murong Chincheng said bluntly. Waiting for who? You shouldn't be in the Crimson Continent. Our luck is good. After 100,000 years, we can directly enter the Heaven Realm. It might not be the same for other places. We need to gather a set of golden primal chaos talismans or a set of blue primal chaos talismans. There might not even be one in 1,000 people who can gather both. The beautiful woman shook her head. I believe you will come. Murong Chincheng's expression was firm. The Crimson Continent was very big. There were many places that were similar to castles. Some were towers, some were tribes, and some were crystal spheres. Every place was shrouded in a mysterious power. This power was incomparably profound and could actually isolate the primal chaos law. Of course, the primal chaos law was everywhere and had a much larger range. Chapter 1458. The primal chaos ocean was extremely dangerous. The longer one drifted, the more dangers one would encounter. In 1,000 years, Yi Chun and the Yin-Yang Battle Saint had encountered 3 level 9 chaos creatures. If it weren't for their outstanding strength and the fact that their soul seas contained the 5 elemental laws and the Yin-Yang laws, they would have died 3 times already. That was close. The Yin-Yang Battle Saint tossed a gourd of divine wine to Yi Chun. This was the last 2 gourds of divine wine. Gulp. The Yin-Yang Battle Saint took a sip first, wiped the corner of his mouth, and said, I underestimated the danger of the chaotic ocean. The chances of a high-level demigod reaching the Crimson Continent alive are very low. Staying in the chaotic continent is actually the best choice. Maybe we're just unlucky, Yi Chun said after receiving the divine wine. Then we're really unlucky to encounter 3 level 9 chaos creatures in 1,000 years. If it were anyone else, they would have died long ago. The Yin-Yang Battle Saint wore a helpless expression. While the 2 of them were rushing to the Crimson Continent, others were also rushing to the Crimson Continent. Some were already close to the Crimson Continent, while others had just set off. What the 2 of them didn't know was that there wasn't just one Chaos Continent in the Primal Chaos battlefield. There were a total of 8 of them, and they were located in 8 different directions of the Scarlet Continent. Due to the distance, the 8 Chaos Continents wouldn't interact with each other. Of the 8 Chaos Continents, Yi Chun's direction had the least people. There were only 2, Yi Chun and the Yin-Yang Battle Sage. The Chaos Continent with the most people had 9 life forms heading towards the Scarlet Continent. Rumble. The huge waves reached the sky, and an incomparably huge sea snake darted out of the sea, pouncing toward the 3 universe life forms. Level 9, Chaos Creature, Chaos Sea Divine Snake. Run. Of these 3 cosmic beings, the first 2 had comprehended the law of light and darkness and the law of life and death respectively. The last one was the strangest. His entire body was wrapped in a terrifying energy. The cosmic life form that comprehended the law of light and darkness turned into a beam of chaotic light and shot out. The cosmic life form that comprehended the law of life and death turned into an incorporeal body that existed between life and death, like a ghost. As for the last one, he actually did not comprehend the laws, but his strength was not the slightest bit weaker than the first two. In fact, he even surpassed them. Whoosh! The three of them were extremely fast. It didn't take long for them to shake off the chaos sea god snake. Battle Sage Huang Xin, your divine power is truly powerful. We had to use the light and darkness rule power and the life and death rule power to escape from the chaos-y divine snake. But you only need to use your divine power, and you can maintain it for a long time. The cosmic life form that comprehended the law of light and darkness said enviously. Battle Sage Royal Heart was a cosmic life form with a large head and eyes that looked like giant gems. He said proudly, once you activate the light of the soul, you can also refine divine power. Activating light of the soul is easier said than done. I really don't know how a freak like you did it. Haha. Why do I feel that it's very easy? On the contrary, comprehending the laws is much more difficult. Battle Sage Royal Heart was both proud and envious. If he could comprehend the principle, his strength would rise to an extremely terrifying level, enough to rival a powerful demigod. Battle Sage Royal Heart was not the only one who had refined divine power. In another direction, there was also a female battle sage called Divine Dancing Archer Sage who had also refined divine power. When she shot an arrow, it could destroy and pierce through everything. Brother, one day, I will become a true god and revive you. The godly dancing archer sage looked down at the jade pendant on her chest. It was a gift from her brother. Ancient Fragrance Castle. A green-haired woman dressed in azure clothes said to Murong Qingchen, you are very lucky. Your aptitude can only be considered ordinary compared to others, but in our Ancient Fragrance Castle is an extremely good aptitude. Our Ancient Fragrance Castle does not value cultivation aptitude, but rather your innate constitution. The better your innate constitution, the faster your progress in our Ancient Fragrance Castle. Why does our Ancient Fragrance Castle not value cultivation aptitude? Murong Qingcheng asked doubtfully. The green-haired woman said, there are 3,000 great Daos, and every one of them can be walked to the extreme. The Dao of our Ancient Fragrance Castle is originally different from other Daos. As for the essence of it, even I only know a little. This is an Ancient Fragrance divine vein diagram. How much you can comprehend will depend on your luck. The green-haired woman waved her right hand, and a diagram fell into Murong Qingcheng's hand. This was a diagram of fresh flowers. The fresh flowers in the diagram looked vivid and lifelike, even more realistic than real fresh flowers. But upon closer inspection, one could see that the lines of the fresh flowers were very simple, and only a few strokes were needed. Murong Qingcheng exclaimed in her heart. Although her cultivation level was not high, she could more or less see that this diagram was very profound. It could only be understood but not explained. Many thanks, Lady Qinghua. Murong Qingcheng kept the Ancient Fragrance divine vein diagram. The green-haired woman descended from the heaven realm and was a powerful demigod. And the Ancient Fragrance Castle belonged to the mighty true god Ancient Fragrance. Back then, when Murong Qingcheng was teleported to the Scarlet Continent, she caught the eye of the true god Ancient Fragrance's envoy and was brought to the Ancient Fragrance Castle. She mysteriously became a member of the Ancient Fragrance Castle. Of course, it was also because of this that her cultivation was able to improve by leaps and bounds. In a short 20,000 years, she had already reached the peak of the legendary Paragon realm. In these 1,000 years, her improvement was even faster. Under the guidance of the green-haired woman, Murong Qingcheng successfully became a demigod. Murong Qingcheng had a feeling that if she could comprehend this Ancient Fragrance divine vein diagram, she should be able to become a beginner demigod. Another 5,000 years passed. Yi Chun and the Yin-Yang battle Saint finally saw the Scarlet Continent. From afar, the Scarlet Continent gave off a very oppressive feeling. It was as if a continent was about to break out of the water. It was incomparably huge and majestic. There really is a scarlet continent, haha. The yin-yang battle saint was excited. In reality, he did not dare to confirm the existence of the scarlet continent and had only heard of it. Yes, Yichen was also excited. He had some doubts about the yin-yang battle saint's words, but he felt that there was enough time. It did not matter if he accompanied the yin-yang battle saint. Let's go. Faster. The yin-yang battle saint's speed soared as he swept toward the scarlet continent. Yichen followed closely behind. In a short while, the two of them arrived at the scarlet continent. Buzz, an invisible force, pulled the two of them to the left continent where there was plenty of light. Two more. Not bad. Around the two of them, powerful life forms appeared one after another. Yi Chun and the yin-yang battle saint were shocked to discover that these life forms were no weaker than level 9 chaos creatures. They were obviously powerful demigods. With so many powerful demigods appearing at once, it was hard for the two of them not to be shocked. You are? The yin-yang battle saint asked. A female demigod with a pair of butterfly wings on her back said, "We are the messengers of the true gods. We are responsible for receiving you here." Messengers of the true gods? How many true gods are there? Yichen was very curious. He wanted to know how many true gods there were. A powerful demigod the size of a small mountain said, "The heaven realm has a total of 7 main gods, namely the chaos main god, sword god, demon god, undying main god, destruction main god, life main god, and death main god. Every main god has a certain number of follower gods. As for how many true gods there are, we are also not clear because some true gods like to travel alone. No one knows where they are." Chapter 1459. To a certain extent, true gods were no longer afraid of the law of chaos, especially the main gods. They had their own main god world, where the law of chaos could not interfere with them. They could completely control the cycle of life and death in the main god world. Although ordinary true gods weren't as powerful as main gods, they could still roam the primal chaos. The primal chaos was too vast. Even true gods couldn't roam the entire primal chaos. Fortunately, true gods had endless lives. They could use their endless lives to explore the primal chaos. Since ancient times, many true gods have been born in the heaven realm. Some true gods were unknown. Other than the main god of chaos, no one knew how many true gods there were. Sword god, demon god? Yichen's heart skipped a beat. He had never heard of sword god. Demon god was the main god of demons. Of course, this was only Yichen's personal opinion. Perhaps the demons were just a random race created by demon god. After all, as the main god, demon god could not only create races in the heaven and earth universe. Main god, subordinate god, this is so interesting. The heaven realm is greater and more charming than I imagined. Yin-yang battle saint yearned. A powerful illusory demigod said coldly, "Don't be happy too early. Although geniuses like you are rare, there are still many of them in all the universes. Moreover, a new batch of universe geniuses is born every million years. Once you enter the heaven realm, you will no longer be as unique as before. If you don't work hard enough, you may soon become a second-rate character. What's the point if there is no challenge?" Yin-yang battle saint did not take the other's words to heart. Among the 7 overgods, the chaos overgod is the supreme overgod and is absolutely neutral. The other 6 overgods oppose each other. Our Radiance Divine Alliance has 3 overgods, namely the Sword God, the Immortality Overgod, and the Life Overgod. The life seeds of the two of you are the life seeds of our Radiance Divine Alliance, which is why you were drawn to the Radiance Continent, which is the Darkness Continent. According to the path of your cultivation, you can choose to join a true god. How do we choose? Yichen asked. For now, you won't be choosing a true god. The true gods will choose you first. If only one true god chooses you, you can only join that true god. If there are more than one, you can choose one of them. There are 3 overgod stones here. They are the Divine Sword Stone, the Immortal Stone, and the Stone of Life. A powerful demigod filled with boundless vitality pointed at the yin-yang battle saint. The yin-yang battle saint took a step forward. The next moment, three mysterious stones appeared out of thin air above the yin-yang battle saint's head. One of the stones lit up. It was the stone of life. Your path of cultivation is suitable for the core god of life's deity system. Now, you will begin the second stage of the test. The divine sword stone and the stone of eternity disappeared, and smaller stones appeared all around the stone of life. Each stone carried the aura of the overgod of life, but they were all slightly different. Buzz, buzz, buzz. A total of 3 stones lit up. The true god of all things, the Azure God, and the Skylark God are all suitable for your path of cultivation. Please choose one. The yin-yang battle saint did not speak. He stared at the 3 stones. Although there were only 3 stones, he could see many things. These stones seemed to have been specially refined by a true god. Even if it was just a trace of aura, one could see endless possibilities, see the changes of all things, and see a part of the cultivation path of this true god. It was mysterious and unfathomable. Since I am suitable for the core god of life's deity system, can I choose the core god of life? The yin-yang battle saint suddenly asked. No. The powerful demigod filled with boundless vitality said, only if the stone of life keeps flashing would it mean that the stone of life values you. Unfortunately, it doesn't. All right then, I choose the true god of all things. The yin-yang battle saint said, welcome to the temple of the universe. The powerful demigod who was the size of a small mountain revealed a smile. The yin-yang battle saint was quite talented. As the messenger of the true god of all things, he naturally hoped that the yin-yang battle saint would choose the temple of the universe. It's your turn. The powerful demigods looked at Yi-chun. Compared to the yin-yang battle saint, Yi-chun was clearly a demigod who cultivated the sword Tao. He should be suitable for the sword god deity system. Of course, those who cultivated the sword Tao did not necessarily have to join the sword god deity system. There were also sword cultivators in other deities. Yi-chun took a step forward. The next moment, 3 master god stones appeared above Yi-chun's head. Buzz, 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 buzz. What shocked the powerful demigods was that the sword god stone and the immortal stone actually flashed at the same time. Even the stone of life lit up. This meant that the sword god stone and the immortal stone had chosen Yi-chun, and Yi-chun could also join the core god of life's deity system. This situation was almost impossible. The yin-yang battle saint's eyes almost popped out. He was both envious and shocked. Which deity system will you choose? A powerful demigod asked. Yi-chun could choose any of the 3 deities. Yi-chun said, I choose the core god, sword god. There is no need to consider it all. Yi-chun would naturally choose the sword god. As for the sword god's follower god, Yi-chun didn't even consider it. Are you not going to consider the immortal deity? A powerful demigod filled with an immortal aura said, unwilling to give up. Being chosen by the immortal stone meant that Yi-chun was the best choice. It would be a pity not to fight for it. There's no need. Yi-chun shook his head. That's good. Sigh. The powerful demigod filled with an immortal aura sighed and said in a loud voice, Shadowless Sword Saint, are you still not coming out? Your Sword God Palace has gained another member. Without a sound, a powerful demigod with a sharp aura appeared. Who is it? As he spoke, his gaze was fixed on Yi-chun. Haha, good. Welcome to our Sword God Palace. Let me tell you, our Sword God Palace is the hardest to join among the 6 core gods. This is because every member of our Sword God Palace is a true expert of the Sword Tao. All right, we all know how powerful the Sword God Palace is. Can you stop showing off? The other powerful demigods were extremely envious. Huh! The shadowless Sword Saint laughed loudly. The woman in your 5 elemental space should come out too. Let's see which true god is suitable for her. Yi-chun's 5 elemental space could fool yin-yang battle sages, but it couldn't fool the powerful demigods present. After a while, the results of Su Jing's test came out. Su Jing was also suitable for the Sword God Pantheon, but the Sword God Stone didn't choose her. The ones who chose her were the Desolate God, the Barbarian God, and the Beast God. Su Jing chose the Beast God. Come, follow me to the Sword God Palace. The shadowless sword saint pulled Yi-Chun away. "Wait," Yi-Chun suddenly said. "Have you seen her?" Yi-Chun waved his right hand, and the image of Murong Qingsheng appeared. "I've seen her before. She joined our ancient fragrance castle. Our ancient fragrance castle belongs to the great true god Ancient Fragrance, and true god Ancient Fragrance belongs to the sword god Pantheon," the powerful demigod with butterfly wings on her back said. She was the envoy of true god Ancient Fragrance. Chapter 1460. Just like that, Yi-Chun was in the Sword God Palace, Su Jing was in the Beast God Valley, and Murong Qingsheng was in the Ancient Fragrant Castle. Although the three of them were not under the same true god, they were from the same celestial system and could meet each other frequently. Yi-Chun gave Murong Qingsheng a lot of the divine power crystals that he had obtained to help her become an elementary demigod as soon as possible. Currently, Murong Qingsheng was a demigod, and Su Jing was slightly weaker at the peak of the legendary supremacy. However, after joining the Beast God Valley, there should be a period of rapid development, and it would not be difficult for her to reach the demigod level. After getting rid of his worries, Yi-Chun started to calm down and focus on his cultivation. Just like what the sword god emissary Shadowless Sword Saint had said, it was very difficult to join the Sword God Palace. In the entire Scarlet Continent, the Sword God Palace only had Yi-Chun. The other true gods had more or less some members under them. When the Primal Chaos battlefield opened, many people were directly teleported to the Scarlet Continent, and Murong Qingsheng was one of them. What is a sword? A will that can move unhindered in the Primal Chaos. The reason why the members of the Sword God Palace can fight 1 against 10 is not because of our high cultivation, but because we have a sharp sword in our hearts that can cut through all restraints. The Shadowless Sword Saint thought very highly of Yi-Chun. In the Heaven Domain, there were not many members of the Sword God Palace. Although he was a sword god emissary, there was nothing special about him. As long as one was a member of the Sword God Palace, anyone could become a sword god emissary. However, Yi-Chun was different. Since he was chosen by the Sword God Stone and the Immortal Stone, and the Stone of Life did not reject him, it meant that he was really special. He might even become a peak figure in the Sword God Palace and lead the Sword God Palace into battle. Such a person naturally had to be treated with caution. Is it because of the Sword of Soul? Yi-Chun said, "That's right. Although the Sword of the Soul is also part of the Light of the Soul, it's definitely the best of the Light of the Soul. With the Sword of the Soul as the core, the divine power condensed is invincible and unstoppable. You haven't reached the realm of the Sword of the Soul yet, and you haven't condensed divine power, so the gap between you and others isn't that great. Once you reach that stage, the gap will start to show. Before that, you must think of a way to research Heart Force and focus most of your energy on Heart Force, with laws taking second place. In fact, although your current realm of laws isn't comparable to most powerful demigods, most demigods haven't comprehended the 5 elements or the laws of yin and yang like you have. For example, I only comprehended the laws of shadow and wind. The Shadowless Sword Saint's figure flickered, and suddenly, 8 Shadowless Sword Saints appeared. 7 of them were shadows. When the shadows dissipated, the Shadowless Sword Saint turned, and a whirlwind rushed into the sky. The Shadowless Sword Saint's figure immediately became blurry, and he came and went without a trace. This was the advanced wind walking technique, which had already been integrated into the laws of wind. What high realm! Yi-Chun was secretly shocked. He could see that the Shadowless Sword Saint's 7 shadows all had very high combat power, and they were almost no weaker than the original body. Moreover, the Shadowless Sword Saint's wind-walking technique was integrated with the laws of wind. Not to mention chasing the opponent, he did not even know where the opponent was. How could he chase after the opponent? This had already reached another level. The Shadowless Sword Saint explained, "When you reach the level of the Sword of Soul, it will be much easier to comprehend the laws. At that time, you will be one of the strongest demigods." The Shadowless Sword Saint was very envious of Yi-Chun and the Yin-Yang Battle Sage. Of the 2 of them, one had comprehended the laws of 5 elements, and the other had comprehended the laws of Yin-Yang. When they condensed their divine power, it would be amazing. This word was personally written by the great sword god. Although it is only a projection, and the real body is in the heaven domain sword god palace, to you and me, it is still a great inspiration. You can look at it often and find out the mysteries within. The shadowless sword saint brought Yi Chun to the core of the sword god palace. There was a stone tablet there, and the word sword was written on it. The word sword had a total of 9 strokes. Yi Chun realized that this word only had 1 stroke. Although it was only 1 stroke, it did not affect the overall effect. It was as if the word sword was in a complex space-time, and the connection could be seen but not found. How amazing! Yi Chun was completely immersed in it, and he did not even know when the shadowless sword saint left. In the blink of an eye, 1,000 years had passed, and Yi Chun woke up. 1,000 years have passed. Yi Chun could not feel the passage of time at all, and he did not feel that he had comprehended anything. It was as if 1,000 years had passed in the blink of an eye. That's normal. When I first saw this word, it took me 3,000 years to wake up. You're already very fast. The shadowless sword saint suddenly appeared and said with a smile. Time no longer had much meaning to demigods. The golden martial path Yuan spirit could allow the weakest elementary demigod to live for more than 100 million years. Every once in a while, Yi Chun would come to observe the word sword. The first time, he woke up after 1,000 years. The second time, it was 800 years. The third time was 500 years. The fourth time, it was 300 years. The fifth time, it was 100 years. The sixth time, it was also 100 years. Unknowingly, it had been 40,000 years since Yi Chun came to the primal chaos battlefield. Straight but not straight, curved but not curved. There's a curve in the straight and a straight in the curve. Illusory and real change, and it all depends on one's heart. As he chanted, a faint misty light was emitted from within Yi Chun's body, and it was abnormally sharp. This is really special. In such a short time, he found the entrance to the Sword of Soul. The shadowless sword saint praised. It was very difficult to reach the Sword of Soul level. Some people spent countless years and couldn't even find the entrance. Yi Chun hadn't reached the Sword of Soul level yet, but at least he found the entrance. As long as the time was right, he would definitely step into this realm. When Yi Chun woke up, the misty light suddenly dissipated. On the 45,000 years since Yi Chun came to the primal chaos battlefield, a powerful demigod from the Sword God Palace descended. Shadowless Sword Saint, long time no see. This powerful demigod clearly recognized the Shadowless Sword Saint and smiled. The Shadowless Sword Saint sized up the other party. Sweet Dew Sword Saint, I didn't expect you to descend. The Sweet Dew Sword Saint's status in the Sword God Palace was higher than his. She had comprehended the law of water, the law of wood, and the law of wind. It's rare for my Sword God Palace to have a new member. How is his talent? The Sweet Dew Sword Saint asked. His talent is very good. He has comprehended the law of 5 elements and has already found the entrance to the Sword of Soul. Oh, really? He has actually comprehended the law of 5 elements? The Sweet Dew Sword Saint was somewhat curious. She spread her divine energy and instantly discovered Yi Chun, who was observing the word. Transforming into a drop of sweet dew, the Sweet Dew Sword Saint instantly appeared above Yi Chun. He didn't disturb Yi Chun and just waited quietly. After 100 years, Yi Chun woke up and discovered the Sweet Dew Sword Saint and the Shadowless Sword Saint. The Shadowless Sword Saint introduced, "This is the Sweet Dew Sword Saint. This time, he descended and brought you a Sword Tao Divine inscription diagram. If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask him. Naturally, you can also ask me." Sword Tao Divine inscription diagrams were extremely precious. One could only bring them down with the permission of the higher-ups. Chapter 1461. Sword Type Divine Inscription Diagram. Yi Chun was puzzled. The Sweet Dew Sword Saint explained, "Every single sword type divine inscription diagram contains a sword type divine art. Only a true divinity of the sword would be able to create a sword type divine art. A divine art can contain any type of law. Look at my divine art, Sweet dew, it contains the law of water, the law of wood, and the law of wind. The sweet dew sword sage clenched her right hand, and a treasure sword condensed from sweet dew appeared. With a wave of the sweet dew sword, the void instantly became moist, and the ground was covered in sweet dew. Yichen suddenly discovered that his body was also sprinkled with the sweet dew, but he didn't have any reaction at all, as if the sweet dew had appeared out of thin air. Although the sweet dew did not display any killing power, Yichun did not believe that it did not have any power. It was clear that the sweet dew sword sage had shown mercy. Comprehending a divine art from the sword Tao divine inscription diagrams varies from person to person. In truth, a true divine art requires a law of divinity. You possess the 5 elemental laws. If you can comprehend a divine art from the sword Tao divine inscription diagrams, the might of that divine art would be inconceivable. Naturally, you've just started to comprehend a divine art, so your attainment would be very shallow. You still need time to perfect it. The sweet dew sword saint explained. At this moment, the shadowless sword saint continued. Other than this, the usage of the divine inscription diagrams isn't so simple. Even if one can't comprehend a divine art, as long as they can comprehend a trace of it, it would be extremely beneficial to one's cultivation base. Divine arts created by true divinities aren't only used for killing. They're also the essence of the martial Tao. Yichen nodded. Since it was a divine skill, it was naturally marvelous beyond words. With a wave of her right hand, a painting landed in Yichen's hand. The sweet dew sword saint spoke. This is an initial level sword type, divine inscription diagram. Comprehend it well. As for what divine techniques you can comprehend, that will depend on your own luck. Yichen opened the painting and saw a few drops of blood on it. It was so simple that it made one's hair stand on end. How marvelous! With just one glance, Yichen was captivated. From these few drops of blood, he could see countless possibilities. The painting seemed simple, but the content contained within was unimaginable. Just like that, Yichen spent half of his time observing the word and the other half comprehending the divine inscription diagram. Comprehending a divine art from a divine inscription diagram was countless times more difficult compared to what Yichen had imagined. 15,000 years had passed, yet he had no clue at all. However, there seemed to be something new in his heart, and he would occasionally have a flash of inspiration. Shadowless Sword Saint, how long do you think it will take for him to comprehend the divine skill? In a pavilion of the Sword God Palace, the sweet dew Sword Saint and the Shadowless Sword Saint were drinking and chatting. Occasionally, they would look at Yichen's progress through space. After drinking a mouthful of wine, the Shadowless Sword Saint spoke in a low voice. In our Sword God Palace, the fastest person to comprehend the first divine art is the idealistic Sword Saint. He spent 30,000 years. The second fastest is the incomparable Sword Saint, spending 35,000 years. As for the Green Lotus Sword Saint, his talent is extremely high. I estimate that he would also spend 50,000 years or less. The Sweet Dew Sword Saint nodded. Back then, the idealistic Sword Saint comprehended the laws of yin and yang. The incomparable Sword Saint comprehended the laws of life and death, while the Green Lotus Sword Saint comprehended the laws of the 5 elements. Their foundations are roughly the same, and the difficulty of comprehending a divine art is roughly the same as well. If there are no accidents, he should be able to comprehend his first divine art within 50,000 years. It could be said that comprehending a divine art wasn't difficult, but it wasn't simple either. Sometimes, with a flash of inspiration, a divine art might appear. Naturally, for the same divine inscription diagram, the divine art comprehended by each person would be different. Under the situation where the foundations were the same, depending on one's comprehension abilities, the divine art comprehended would be slightly weaker, slightly stronger, and also similar. However, the style of the divine art comprehended would be different. The Undying Deity Palace's luck is truly off the charts this time around. That divine dance archer saint, although he didn't comprehend any laws, he has condensed godly energy. His combat prowess is unrivaled in the entire primal chaos battlefield. The topic shifted to the divine dance archer saint as the shadowless sword saint spoke. After condensing godly energy, comprehending the laws is only a matter of time. But after comprehending the laws, condensing godly energy would take a very long time. The undying deity palace has truly picked up a treasure. The sweet dew sword saint sighed in admiration. The powers of the god lords were all deity palaces. The sword god palace belonged to the sword god palace. The undying god palace belonged to the undying god palace. The life god palace belonged to the life god palace. The devil god palace belonged to the devil god palace. The destruction god palace belonged to the destruction god palace. The death god palace belonged to the death god palace, and the primal chaos god palace belonged to the primal chaos god palace. However, over at the darkness continent, the destruction deity palace also has a new member that has condensed godly energy. His name is the royal heart battle sage. There are so many universes in the primal chaos battlefield, and the primal chaos battlefield only opens once every million years. It's inevitable that there would be some demon-level geniuses appearing. It's not worth being surprised. With regard to these demon-level geniuses, although the sweet dew sword saint was filled with admiration, he wouldn't be shocked. He had lived for countless years and had seen all sorts of characters before. The sword god palace's idealistic sword saint and lofty sword saint were both extremely outstanding characters. However, even now, they had yet to break through to the true god realm. Compared to a true god, geniuses weren't even worth mentioning. Years 65,000 since Yi Chun arrived at the primal chaos battlefield. Drifting blood. Staring at the few drops of blood on the painting, Yi Chun could feel a desolate and cruel aura. This aura grew stronger and stronger, causing Yi Chun to gain new insights with every passing moment. Year 68,000 in the primal chaos battlefield. A sharp aura suddenly gushed forth from Yi Chun as the few drops of blood flashed past. The hearts of the shadowless sword saint and the sweet dew sword saint jolted as they hurriedly glanced over. This aura? The shadowless sword saint had a look of bewilderment on his face. This is the sign of comprehending a divine art. He has already sensed the essence of the divine inscription painting. As long as the essence is present, no matter how the divine art transforms, its might would still be the same. Year 70,000 in the primal chaos battlefield. So this is the case. Yi Chun opened his eyes. He raised his right index and middle fingers and tapped out. Pooh! In the air, a few drops of blood flashed past as the stench of blood permeated the air. Even though they were separated by space-time, the shadowless sword saint and the sweet dew sword saint could still smell the stench of blood. 25,000 years. He comprehended it faster than the idealistic sword saint and lofty sword saint. The shadowless sword saint and the sweet dew sword saint exchanged glances. The speed of comprehending the first divine art didn't mean that Yi Chun's comprehension was higher than the idealistic sword saint and the lofty sword saint. But at the very least, it meant that Yi Chun was a genius on the same level as the idealistic sword saint. After countless years, the idealistic sword saint and the lofty sword saint had long reached the pinnacle of the demigod realm. Below the true god realm, they were almost invincible. Is this the power of a divine art? The energy is completely restrained and condensed within a few drops of blood. The 5 elemental laws also naturally fused into it. Before this, Yi Chun's strongest attack was the 5 elemental laws. However, the 5 elemental laws required time to accumulate, and it was impossible for him to fight for a long period of time. Now that he had a divine art, things were different. He could completely maintain his peak combat prowess for a long period of time. Also, Yi Chun had yet to perfect this divine art, and there was still room for improvement. When the time came, the might of this divine art would surely be even more terrifying. Let's name this divine art Drifting Blood. Drifting blood, the blood of his enemies was drifting. Chapter 1462. The Radiance continent and the Darkness continent were separated by a mountain range called the Scarlet Mountain Range. Legend had it that the Scarlet Mountain Range was stained with the blood of a true god and contained divine stones. However, ordinary people couldn't enter the Scarlet Mountain Range. The pressure of the mountain range was enough to crush mid-level demigods to death. Only high-level demigods could resist the pressure. A streak of fire flew up the mountain. It was Yi Chun. In order for a divine artifact to upgrade, it had to absorb divine stones. The law fragment could only upgrade one aspect of the divine artifact, not all aspects. Since the Scarlet Mountain Range contained a large number of divine stones, Yi Chun naturally wouldn't miss this opportunity. Other than the Firmament Sword, he wanted to get a few more Sky Sage artifact swords. If possible, it would be even better if he could upgrade it to 4 or even 5 stars. The Scarlet Mountain Range was desolate, and there was a faint aura that made one's heart palpitate. It was as if mortals were in the wilderness, filled with helplessness and desolation. After flying past the mountain, Yi Chun suddenly stopped. PFFF. A few drops of blood flew out, and a big hole appeared on the mountain. After entering the hole, Yi Chun found a stone pillar covered with divine stones. At a glance, there were at least 30 of them. After cutting off the divine stones, Yi Chun flew out of the hole and continued his search. Searching for divine stones was very boring. Sometimes one couldn't find a single divine stone even after 100 years. Of course, there were times when one was lucky and could find over 100 divine stones in a day. In the blink of an eye, 5,000 years had passed, and Yi Chun had finally obtained more than 1,000 divine stones. 1,000 divine stones wasn't a small number. One had to know that a supreme weapon could become a 1-star Earth Sage artifact after fusing 1 divine stone. A 1-star Earth Sage artifact with 9 divine stones would become a 1-star Sky Sage artifact. A 1-star Sky Sage artifact with 80 divine stones would become a 9-star Sky Sage artifact, and a 9-star Sky Sage artifact with 100 divine stones would become a divine artifact. Divine artifacts were the weapons of true gods. There were only 3 ways for a demigod to obtain a divine artifact. The first was to be specially refined by a true god. The second was to be extremely lucky and obtain an ownerless divine artifact, and the last was to use divine stones to upgrade it. No matter which one it was, it would be extremely difficult. Yi Chun had a lot of Earth Saint swords, more than 300 of them. Half a month had passed, and 1,000 divine stones had been used up. Yi Chun now had 79-star Earth Saint swords in his possession. Unfortunately, he had also destroyed 50 Earth Saint swords in this period of time. Not every Earth Saint sword could withstand the impact of the divine stones. Still not enough. Yi Chun planned to make as many 9-star Earth Saint swords as possible and upgrade them to Heavenly Saint Sword one by one. Before that, he would not upgrade the Firmament Sword's grade. The Firmament Sword was a 3-star Heavenly Saint weapon, and it had devoured the Wind Law Fragment during this period. It was very precious. He would upgrade the Firmament Sword's grade when he had enough 3-star Heavenly Saint swords. Day after day, year after year, another 15,000 years passed. It has been 90,000 years since Yi Chun came to the Primal Chaos battlefield. There were only 10,000 years left until the 100,000 years. When the 100,000 years were up, the Scarlet Continent would bring them into the Heaven Realm. A total of 189-star Earth Saint swords. Not bad. After 15,000 years, the number of 9-star Earth Saint swords in Yi Chun's possession had reached 180. As for the other Earth Saint swords, they had all been destroyed. As time passed, more and more people came to the Scarlet Mountain Range. Some were from the Radiance Continent, and some were from the Darkness Continent. Both sides seemed to be very restrained, and there were very few battles. This continued until the 95,000 year. Boom! A wave of divine stones surged into the sky, and the dazzling radiance of the divine stones was like a rising sun. Sword God Palace, sweet, Dew Sword, Saint revealed a look of envy. If it wasn't for the fact that we can't leave the Sword God Palace, I would want to rob them. This should be a divine stone pit. Places with more divine stones in the Scarlet Mountain Range would form a divine stone pit. There would be at least a few thousand divine stones in the pit, and some could even reach 10,000. Isn't that so? But if that happens, the Scarlet Continent will be in chaos. Shadowless Sword Saint also had a look of envy. The Scarlet Continent had its own laws. True god emissaries, or powerful demigods that descended from the heaven realm, could only stay in specific places. Looking at the divine stone radiance rising from the east, Yichen couldn't help but hold his breath. Whoosh! Using the 5 elemental fire escape technique, Yichen's speed soared to the limit. 15 minutes later, Yichen arrived at his destination. This place was already in chaos. There were people from the Radiance Continent, and there were people from the Darkness Continent. Among them, 2 people attracted Yichen's attention. One was a female battle sage who used bows and arrows as her weapon. Yichen recognized her. She was the divine, dancing archer sage of the Immortal Palace. She had already condensed divine power, and her strength was unfathomable. The other person was a cosmic life form with a huge head and eyes like giant gems. He had also condensed divine power, and he seemed to be called the Royal Heart Battle Sage. In the middle of everyone was a dazzling pit. Inside the pit, countless divine stones lay, sparkling and glaring. Clearly, someone had found the divine stone pit. Unfortunately, the commotion was too big, and it attracted the nearby people. Then a great battle broke out, and it became the current chaotic battle. At least 10,000. Yichen estimated the number of divine stones. Green Lotus Sword Sage, come and help. When the time comes, we will divide the divine stones among ourselves. In the Radiance Continent, everyone knew each other. This was the time to unite. Okay. Yichen joined the battle without hesitation. He did not think of monopolizing the divine stones. Otherwise, not only would he annoy the people of the Radiance Continent, but he would also become the target of public criticism. Originally, the Radiance Continent was in a slight disadvantage. After Yichen joined in, the Radiance Continent immediately suppressed the people of the Darkness Continent. Yichen's opponent was called the Revolution Battle Sage. He had comprehended the law of life and death. Unfortunately, he had not comprehended a divine skill. Although he had many tricks up his sleeve, he was still in a difficult situation under the divine skill Floating Blood. I can't stop him. The Revolution Battle Sage shouted. He had already used the power of the law of life and death. Seeing that the power of the law of life and death was diminishing, he panicked and wanted to ask for help. Revolution Battle Sage, let's change opponents. A voice came. The Revolution Battle Sage looked over and saw the Black Blood Battle Sage. The Black Blood Battle Sage had comprehended a divine skill 3,000 years ago, and his strength was second only to the Royal Heart Battle Sage. Okay. The Revolution Battle Sage hurriedly flew to the Black Blood Battle Sage. Your opponent is me. The Black Blood Battle Sage blocked Yichen. You can't stop me. With the firmament sword in hand, Yichen continuously performed the divine skill Floating Blood. Let's give it a try. The Black Blood Battle Sage also performed the divine skill. Numerous blurry black sparrows flew out, bringing with them the aura of doomsday. Puffed, puffed, puffed. The blood and the black sparrows collided, triggering a series of shock waves. However, Yichen was obviously stronger. A drop of blood splashed on the Black Blood Battle Sage. Puffed. The drop of blood seemed small, but the impact was extremely terrifying, sending the Black Blood Battle Sage flying. After comprehending the divine skill Floating Blood, Yichen did not waste his time. Floating Blood was becoming more and more perfect. It was not something that the Black Blood Battle Sage, who had only comprehended the divine skill for 3,000 years, could compare to. Chapter 1463. Because he had comprehended a godly technique, the Black Blood Battle Sage's attack power was much stronger than that of the Revolving Wheel Battle Sage. However, his defense was not as strong as the Revolving Wheel Battle Sage. When this drop of blood hit him, he felt as though his body was about to explode. His golden martial path, primordial spirit, was damaged. Why is his divine skill so powerful? Black Blood Battle Sage could not understand. No wonder the Revolving Battle Sage had comprehended the rule of life and death, which allowed him to ignore damage to a certain extent. Take another strike from me. Yichen wielded the firmament sword and attacked again with the Floating Blood divine skill. Black Blood Battle Sage had no choice but to use the rule of yin and yang. Previously, Blackblood Battlesage Divine Skill contained a separate rule of yin and yang. Now, with the complete rule of yin and yang, the form of the divine skill changed. Not only did the Black Sparrow become clearer, its eyes turned from black to gray, and its claws also turned from black to gray. Only its feathers remained black. Squeak, squeak, squeak. The Black Sparrow let out a doomsday-like cry and swooped down at Yichun. Rumble. The blood and the Black Sparrow collided and died together. However, at this moment, several black feathers passed through the chaotic airflow and shot at Yichun. Ding, ding, ding. Using his fingers as a sword, Yichun smashed the black feathers. The combination of the rule of yin and yang with the divine skill is indeed extraordinary. Yichun's eyes brightened as he integrated the rule of 5 elements into the floating blood divine skill. Previously, the floating blood divine skill was a few drops of fresh blood. Now, it was a few drops of bright blood that emitted a 5-colored light, looking even sharper. Blackblood Battlesage could not block this attack. A drop of blood penetrated his chest, and blood flowed out of all his orifices. Before coming to the Crimson Continent, except for the Royal Heart Battlesage and the Divine Dancing Archer Sage, everyone's strength was about the same. Now, however, whoever comprehended the divine skill would be stronger. Those who had not comprehended the divine skill were instantly at a disadvantage, such as the Revolving Battlesage. Relying on the power of the Floating Blood divine skill, Yichun suppressed Blackblood Battlesage badly, even worse than the Revolving Battlesage. The Revolving Battlesage focused on defense, which was much better. No, I can't take it anymore. Battlesage Blackblood's face was pale. In just a short period of time, his martial primordial spirit had sustained significant damage. If this continued, it would be detrimental to his future cultivation. In his opinion, only the Royal Heart Battlesage was a match for Yichun. Since they couldn't win, they could only escape. Royal Heart Battlesage was being held up by the Divine Archer Sage, so there was no chance for him to rescue them. The Green Lotus Sword Sage is so strong. Even the Blackblood Battlesage is no match for him. Haven't you heard? The Green Lotus Sword Saint was chosen by both the Sword God Stone and the Stone of Immortality, and the Stone of Life did not reject him. So that's how it is. No wonder he comprehended the divine skill so early. In our Radiance continent, he and the Divine Dancing Archer Sage should be the strongest. There were only a dozen or so people on both sides, and they were basically evenly matched. No one could do anything to the other. Yichun's overwhelming battle was particularly eye-catching, and it caused everyone to discuss it. Damn, how is this Green Lotus Sword Saint so powerful? The Royal Heart Battlesage frowned. He had seen Yichun's battle strength. Although he was very confident in himself, he didn't think that he could easily suppress Yichun. At most, he could rely on his divine power to slowly gain the upper hand. 6 stars of destruction. The Divine Dancing Archer Sage suddenly launched a divine skill. Sky-Raising Strike. The Royal Heart Battlesage also used a divine skill. The two had long reached the light of the soul level, so comprehending a divine skill was not difficult for them. The Divine Dancing Archer Sage had comprehended a divine skill 8,000 years ago, and the Royal Heart Battlesage had comprehended a divine skill 7,500 years ago. Boom, 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 boom. The divine skills clashed, and the resulting explosion radiated everywhere. In the end, the Royal Heart Battlesage and the others were defeated. Yichun first drove away the Blackblood Battlesage, then helped the others. In the end, the Royal Heart Battlesage knew that he could not turn the tide and reluctantly left. A total of 16,400 divine stones. We have 8 people here, so each person has an average of 2,050 divine stones, the Divine Dancing Archer Sage said. All right, no problem. Everyone beamed with joy. Anyone would be happy to receive 2,000 divine stones in one go. With 2,050 divine stones, Yichun was much more confident. He prepared to upgrade the 180 9-star Earth Saint Swords to 1-star Heaven Saint Swords. After spending 500 divine stones, Yi Chun obtained 30 Heaven Saint swords. The rest were either destroyed or exploded. The failure rate of upgrading a 9-star Earth Saint sword to 1-star Heaven Saint sword was too high. It was already good enough to have 30 swords. Next was to upgrade the 2-star Heaven Saint sword. Every time a quintessential Saint artifact advanced by 1 star, it would need to fuse with 10 pieces of divine stones. After spending 800 divine stones, 12 of the 31-star Heaven Saint swords were upgraded to 2-star Heaven Saint swords. After spending 450 divine stones, 3 of the 12 2-star Heaven Saint swords were upgraded to 3-star Heaven Saint swords. In the end, Yi Chun was left with 300 divine stones. Let's take a gamble. It was time to upgrade the Firmament Sword to a 4-star Heaven Saint sword. If he was unlucky and the Firmament Sword was damaged, he would still have 3 3-star Heaven Saint swords. After taking a deep breath, Yi Chun tried to fuse the divine stones into the Firmament Sword. 2 hours passed. Buzz. The Firmament Sword's sword chi surged, and the sword hummed incessantly. Yi Chun's luck was pretty good. The Firmament Sword successfully upgraded to a 4-star Heaven Saint sword. After reaching the level of a 4-star Sky Saint weapon, the Sky Sword source had become a lot richer, and the space, wind, and water laws inside had also become more complete. Yi Chun estimated that right now, even if he did not use the power of the 5 elements, he would still be able to beat the Black Blood Battle Saint using the power of the Yin and Yang laws. Every time a Sky Saint weapon reached a star level, its power would increase by at least a couple of times. Unknowingly, 100,000 years passed. On this day, countless streams of light flew toward the Scarlet Continent from all directions. Then, the gigantic Scarlet Continent broke out of the water and soared into the sky like a divine turtle. The Scarlet Continent flew. How terrifying is the power needed to make the entire continent fly? Some people exclaimed, this should be the means of a true god. Mortals can't imagine it. The Scarlet Continent was wrapped in a primal chaos light. It led everyone through time and space and flew into the sky. It kept flying as if there was no end. The true god emissary on the Scarlet Continent didn't stay idle either. He started to test everyone. The results were out. The Sword God Palace still only had Yi Chun. The Immortal Palace had one more person. Including the Divine Archer Sage, there were 2 people. The Life God Palace also had 2 people. Apart from these 3 main god factions, the other true god factions all had many members. However, Yi Chun didn't see Deguju and the others. This made him sigh. If he missed this opportunity, it would be 1,000,000 years before he could enter the Heaven Realm again. Of course, 1,000,000 years wasn't long. Maybe in 1,000,000 years, Deguju would already be a demigod. Pop! After an unknown amount of time, the Scarlet Continent passed through a thin membrane. We've entered the Heaven Realm. The sweet Dew Sword Sage and the shadowless Sword Sage smiled. Yi Chun raised his head in confusion. Chapter 1464. Upon entering Heaven Realm, Yi Chun saw 7 suns. The one in the middle was the largest, while the other 6 were slightly smaller. These 7 suns were so huge that, even though they were separated by space and time, they gave off a huge pressure. Different from ordinary suns, although these 7 suns also emitted light and heat, their auras were completely different. The largest sun emitted a simple and unadorned aura, as if it was even more ancient than the heavenly realm. The other 6 suns either emitted a sharp light, like a blade or a sword, or a gentle light, exuding vitality, or an eternal, immortal, and indestructible light, or a dark light, like a fallen night, or a blood-red light, filled with destruction, or a gloomy and cold light, revealing the charm of death. In addition to the 7 suns, there were many stars surrounding the suns. Some of the stars were larger, almost as big as the sun. Some of the stars were dim, as if they would disappear at any moment. There were also stars that flickered with a diamond-like glow. The 7 suns represent the 7 main gods, and the stars represent ordinary true gods. Once a main god or true god dies, the sun and stars they represent will be extinguished. Sweet Dew Sword Sage explained. True gods can also die. Yichen asked. The shadowless sword saint nodded and said, "Of course. True gods are immortal and indestructible. However, there are some places in the primal chaos that are dangerous even for true gods. Once they fall into one of those places, they will most likely die. Other than that, god wars often occur in the heaven realm. The sword god and the demon god are mortal enemies. The immortal master god and the destruction master god and the life master god and the death master god are also natural enemies. Their subordinate gods will often start god wars and cause chaos in heaven realm. Heaven realm is a blessed land, but it is also the source of war. Our goal is to become true gods. Before that, we naturally have to live well and work hard to improve ourselves. After living together for more than 50,000 years, Sweet Dew Sword Sage and Shadowless Sword Sage had a clear understanding of Yichun. This was an extraordinary genius. As long as he didn't die, he would have extraordinary achievements in the future. It was very likely that he would become an existence like idealistic sword sage and incorporeal sword sage. There was even a chance that he would become a true god in the future. I will work hard. Although it was just a few words, Yichun could still faintly feel the difference in the heaven realm. This was a higher stage, and it required more hard work. Arriving at the heaven realm, Yichun, Su Jing, and Murong Qingsheng had to separate. Yichun had to go to the heaven realm's sword god palace. Su Jing had to go to the beast god valley, and Murong Qingsheng had to go to the ancient fragrant castle. Fortunately, the three of them were all members of the sword god divine branch. Although their future living places were very far apart, at least they were in the same region. It was just that the heaven realm was too big, and every true god sphere of influence was very big, even if they were from the same divine branch. Let's go. Sweet Dew Sword Sage and Shadowless Sword Sage brought Yichun to the teleportation array. This was the teleportation array that led to the Sword God Palace. If he were to travel on his own, it would take him a long time to reach his destination. With a flash of light, the three of them disappeared without a trace. The Sword God Palace was incomparably huge. As for how big it was, Yichun couldn't even see it clearly because he could only see the tip of the iceberg. But this tip of the iceberg was already countless times bigger than the primal chaos continent. It was like an island world floating in the sky. Islands were connected to each other, and below and around the islands were white clouds. On the islands were continuous buildings, and every floating island emitted an astonishing sword intent. The gate of the Sword God Palace was in the clouds. It was a simple stone gate that was 300,000 meters tall. Its entire body was stone gray, and a sharp sword was floating above the gate. The sword intent emitted by this sharp sword could cut through the space-time of the heaven realm. Yichun secretly compared it and discovered that his 4-star heavenly saint artifact, the firmament sword, was not even comparable to a firefly. Green Lotus Sword Sage, don't underestimate this sword. This sword is a true divine sword. It has a complete spiritual consciousness, and its combat strength is not inferior to a peak demigod. Just a trace of sword chi can easily annihilate us. Sweet Dew Sword Sage said with reverence. Divine sword. Yichun inwardly clicked his tongue. There was a group of powerful demigods patrolling outside the gate of the Sword God Palace. Seeing Yichun's group, a powerful demigod flew over. Sweet Dew Sword Sage, Shadowless Sword Sage, you are back. And this is? Shadowless Sword Sage introduced. Tiger Subdue Sword Sage. This is Green Lotus Sword Sage, a new member of the Sword God Palace. Green Lotus Sword Sage. This is Tiger Subdue Sword Sage. Greetings, Tiger Subdue Sword Sage. Yichun cupped his fists. Tiger Subdue Sword Sage laughed. My Sword God Palace has very few members. This time, our luck is not bad. We actually have a new member. Under normal circumstances, Sword God's Palace would only accept a new member every 2 million years. This caused Sword God's Palace to have very few members. Of course, this was only in comparison to other true god forces. Actually, after countless years, Sword God's Palace still had many members. After all, elementary demigods could live for over 100 million years, and powerful demigods could live thousands or even tens of thousands of times longer than elementary demigods. After passing through the gate of the Sword God Palace, Yi Chen's group arrived at the first island. Green Lotus Sword Sage, you are still an elementary demigod. Although your battle prowess is shocking and close to that of a powerful demigod, according to the rules of the Sword God Palace, you can only receive the elementary Sword Sage token and the elementary Sword Sage attire. After arriving at a palace, Shadowless Sword Sage helped Yi Chen obtain a token and a set of attire. The token was gold with an ancient sword carved on it. The attire was very special, and the aura it emitted was very similar to the entire Sword God Palace. The Sword Sage token is proof of identity. The Sword Sage attire is the specialty of the Sword God Palace. With the token and the attire, you can enter the Sword God Palace freely. Of course, you cannot enter some forbidden areas as you wish. Apart from that, the Sword Sage attire also has defensive capabilities. It can be stacked with a sacred armor. Shadowless Sword Sage introduced the Sword Sage token and the attire to Yi Chen. After obtaining the token and the attire, Yi Chen began to choose his island. The Sword God Palace was split into 4 regions. The first region was the elementary Sword Saint Island. The second region was the intermediate Sword Saint Island. The third region was the advanced Sword Saint Island. And the fourth region was the core region. Only the true core members could stay there. As an elementary Sword Saint, Yi Chen could only choose an island in the elementary Sword Saint region. Yi Chen chose his island very quickly under the guidance of Sweet Dew Sword Sage and Shadowless Sword Sage. Green Lotus Sword Sage, you can contact me and the Shadowless Sword Sage directly if you need anything in the future. We are in the Advanced Sword Saint region. Sweet Dew Sword Sage was the same as the Shadowless Sword Sage. They were both advanced demigods, but they were advanced Sword Saints. All right, Yi Chen agreed, but he sighed inside. The Sword God Palace really was an over-god organization after all. Sweet Dew Sword Sage and Shadowless Sword Sage were both powerful demigods, yet they were unable to stay in the core region. This showed just how high the average quality of the Sword God Palace was. Probably only those who had reached a certain level of strength could stay in the core region. It had nothing to do with cultivation. Chapter 1465. Even if I have enough god blood, it won't be easy to become a mid-level Sword Saint. Green Lotus Island was the island where Yi Chen lived. In the blink of an eye, 20,000 years had passed since he came to Green Lotus Island. Even though the heavenly realm was rich in resources and the heaven and earth Yuan Qi had a powerful nourishing effect, 20,000 years had passed, and Yi Chen still hadn't been able to reach the next level and become a mid-level Sword Saint. He estimated that if he wanted to become a mid-level Sword Saint in a short time, what he needed wasn't resources, but pressure. One was born in worries and hardships, and one died in peace and happiness. This was true everywhere. Let's go out for a walk. In the past 20,000 years, Yi Chen hadn't learned much about the elementary Sword Saint Island area. He had spent all his energy on breaking through. Since he couldn't break through, Yi Chen didn't plan on wasting his time on a dead end. After leaving Green Lotus Island, Yi Chen flew towards the center of the elementary Sword Saint Island area. Elementary Sword Saints could walk freely in the elementary Sword Saint Island area. Only some restricted areas were restricted. Brother, I'm Dan Yun. Why haven't I seen you before? Flying in the sea of clouds, an elementary Sword Saint approached him. I'm Green Lotus. I just joined the Sword God Palace not long ago. To outsiders, Yi Chen treated Green Lotus as his title. Only his friends would tell him his real name. Dan Yun Sword Saint was very enthusiastic. When he heard that Yi Chen was new, he took the initiative to be Yi Chen's guide. Yi Chen couldn't have asked for more. Green Lotus Sword Saint, this is the Sacred Sword Tower. There are 1-star to 9-star Earth Saint swords. As long as you have enough contribution points, you can have as many sacred swords as you want. The Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint brought Yi Chen to a towering pagoda. How do I obtain contribution points? Yi Chen asked. For example, if you help a Sword Saint greatly, he might give you a certain amount of contribution points. However, the easiest way to obtain contribution points is to challenge the Sword God Pagoda. There are a total of 36 levels in the Sword God Pagoda. Passing the first level will give you 100 contribution points, the second level will give you 200 contribution points, the third level will give you 400 contribution points, and so on. The further you go, the more terrifying the contribution points you will get. Normally, beginner Sword Saints can only make it to the 9th level. The first level gives 100 contribution points. Yichen's brows twitched. Although the first floor's 100 contribution points was not much, it would double with each floor. In this case, the 21st floor would be worth 100 million, not to mention the 36th floor. Dan Yun's Sword Saint laughed. There will never be enough contribution points. Other than the first free Sword Dao Divine Inscription, you'll have to use contribution points to exchange for new Sword Dao Divine Inscription diagrams. Sword Dao Divine Inscription diagrams are divided into 3 grades: beginner, mid-grade, and high-grade. The worst beginner Sword Dao Divine Inscription diagram requires 100,000 contribution points. The best one requires over 100 million contribution points, and the worst mid-grade one requires 1 billion contribution points. The best one requires over 50 billion contribution points, not to mention the high-grade one. I see. Hearing Dan Yun's Sword Saint's explanation, Yichen also felt that he would never have enough contribution points. Although he had already comprehended an initial grade Floating Blood Divine Inscription, Yichen also knew that it wasn't enough. In the future, he would definitely have to comprehend mid-grade Divine Inscriptions, or even high-grade ones. Dan Yun's Sword Saint continued. In our Sword God Palace, there are over 1,000 initial grade Sword Dao Divine Inscription diagrams. Although I'm untalented, I've already comprehended 15 initial grade Divine Inscriptions. Normally speaking, the more initial grade Divine Inscriptions you comprehend, the higher the chances of comprehending a mid-grade one. If not, even if you were given a mid-grade Divine Inscription diagram, you might not be able to comprehend it. Yes, Yichen nodded. This is the Saint Weapon Pagoda. Other than Saint Swords, there are all kinds of Saint Weapons here. This is the Mission Pagoda. As long as you have enough contribution points, you can issue missions of a certain difficulty. For example, asking people to help you search for materials, asking people to help you uncover secrets. The area of the initial grade Sword Saint Island was extremely vast. After a few months, Dan Yun's Sword Saint finally brought Yi Chun across half of the island. This is the Sword Discourse Arena. Your luck isn't bad. Sword Saint Snowheart is currently practicing her initial grade Divine Inscriptions. Today, the two of them arrived at a gigantic island. In the center of the island, there was a square-shaped platform. On the platform, a female Sword Saint was currently practicing her swordsmanship. Around the platform, a sea of people could be seen. The swordsmanship I'm practicing now is the initial grade Divine Inscription diagram I comprehended from the 128th initial grade Sword Dao Divine Inscription diagram. Watch carefully. The silver-haired Sword Saint Snowheart had pointy ears and a tall stature. She held her breath and slashed out with her sword. In the air, snowflakes danced as a teardrop of sword chi pierced through the air. This teardrop was extremely inconspicuous. It didn't emit any energy fluctuations at all. Yet, it contained a soul-stirring might. From afar, Yichen could already feel his Yuan Shun being pierced through. He believed that it was the same for the others. Yichen's countenance changed. The Snowheart Sword Saint was the same as the Sweet Dew Sword Saint. Both of them were powerful demigods. However, the Snowheart Sword Saint seemed to be much stronger than the Sweet Dew Sword Saint. They weren't even on the same level. The symbol of a powerful demigod was their god force and law energy. However, the difference in strength was like the difference between the heavens and the earth. For example, a demigod who had just condensed his god force and comprehended one law energy was a powerful demigod. A demigod who had condensed his god force and comprehended 10 laws energy was also a powerful demigod. Even among powerful demigods, the difference in their comprehensions of the divine arts would also be huge. The Dan Yun Sword Saint sighed in admiration. He then explained to Yi Chun, "Don't be so shocked. The Snowheart Sword Saint is an ultimate Sword Saint." Ultimate Sword Saint? Yi Chun looked at Sword Saint Dan Yun. In the Sword God Palace, there are only 4 ranks of Sword Saint: Elementary Sword Saint, Intermediate Sword Saint, Advanced Sword Saint, and Ultimate Sword Saint. The first 3 ranks are related to one's cultivation, and the prerequisite to becoming an Ultimate Sword Saint is to be an Advanced Sword Saint. Not only must one condense divinity, but all other aspects must also be perfected. For example, one must reach the peak of the 9th Order Sword Intent, the peak of the 9th Order Sword Domain, and the perfection of the 9th Order Spirit Body. Most importantly, one must comprehend complementary laws such as the law of life and death, the law of yin and yang, and the law of the 5 elements. In the Sword God Palace, he is an ultimate sword saint. In the other real god forces, he is an ultimate battle saint. However, in terms of power, our Sword God Palace's ultimate sword saint is outstanding. Dan Yin Sword Saint's eyes were filled with pride. He was proud of Sword God Palace. Perfection in every aspect, and perfection in the laws as well. He is indeed worthy of being called an ultimate sword saint. Yichen nodded. If he had to put it in perspective, ultimate sword saints and ultimate battle saints were equivalent to peak powerful demigods. The threshold to become a powerful demigod was very low. As long as one condensed god force and comprehended the laws, one would be a powerful demigod. The threshold to become an ultimate sword saint or ultimate battle saint was ridiculously high. Chapter 1466. This is the elementary grade divine art I comprehended from the 160th elementary grade divine inscription diagram. Sky blue. This is the elementary grade divine art I comprehended from the 172nd elementary grade divine inscription diagram. Suspended sound sword. Sword Saint Snowheart performed dozens of primary godly skills in one breath. He performed each skill 9 times. During these 9 times, sometimes it was fast, sometimes it was slow, sometimes it was fast, sometimes it was slow, sometimes it was fast, and sometimes it was slow. Sometimes it was split up and performed in segments. He tried his best to let the audience see it clearly, to reduce the difficulty of comprehending it. Sword Saint Scarlet Cloud. How many elementary grade divine arts has Sword Saint Snowheart comprehended? Yichen exclaimed. Sword Saint Scarlet Cloud replied. According to what I know, a few million years ago, Sword Saint Snowheart comprehended over 200 elementary grade divine arts. I wonder if he has comprehended any new elementary grade divine arts in the past few million years. Not only that, Sword Saint Snowheart has comprehended 6 mid-grade divine arts. In terms of strength, he can be considered as one of the strongest ultimate sword saints in our Sword God Palace. Amazing! Yichen sighed in admiration. He had spent 25,000 years to comprehend the elementary grade divine art, Drifting Blood. But even now, he had yet to completely perfect it. Yichen didn't need to ask to know that Sword Saint Snowheart had already comprehended over 200 elementary grade divine arts. If not, he wouldn't have taken him out to show off. Yichen didn't leave. He carefully observed Sword Saint Snowheart's performance of the elementary grade divine arts. Although it was the same divine inscription diagram, every sword saint would comprehend different elementary grade divine arts. But no matter what, they all originated from the same source. Watching others executing their divine arts, one would more or less gain some insights and inspiration. Within 10 days, Sword Saint Snowheart demonstrated a total of 272 elementary grade divine arts. That was an average of 20 to 30 elementary grade divine arts per day. After he finished, Sword Saint Snowheart departed. My sword Chidansha is finally perfected. The Dan Cloud Sword Saint laughed uproariously. The sword Chi Rosy Glow was the initial grade divine inscription he comprehended from the 350th set of divine inscriptions. The higher the number, the more difficult it was to comprehend. But correspondingly, the power of the divine inscriptions would also be greater. Generally speaking, no initial grade sword saint would be willing to slowly comprehend an initial grade divine inscription according to the number of the divine inscriptions. If they did that, the increase in their strength would be too slow. For example, there was basically no difference between the first and second divine inscriptions. Hence, The majority of initial grade sword saints were the same as the Dan Cloud Sword Saint. They would choose one or two of the more difficult initial grade divine inscriptions to comprehend. At this current stage, I shouldn't focus on breaking through. Such matters can't be rushed. I should earn more contribution points to exchange for the initial grade divine inscription diagrams. According to what the Sweet Dew Sword Saint said, comprehending divine arts is also a kind of tempering for one's body. Maybe when one comprehended an initial grade divine art, their cultivation base would naturally break through. Yichen silently mused. After spending a few more months, the Dan Cloud Sword Saint brought Yichen around the entire initial grade Sword Saint Island region, after which the two of them parted ways and Yichen returned to the Green Lotus Island. 5,000 years later, Yichen's initial grade divine art, Drifting Blood, was finally perfected. His strength rose to another level. It's time to challenge the Sword God Pagoda. Yichen wanted to see how many floors of the Sword God Tower he could reach with his current strength. The Dan Cloud Sword Saint reached the 14th level. There were a total of 4 Sword God Pagodas. The first one was located in the initial grade island region and had 9 levels. The second one was located in the mid-grade island region and had 18 levels. The third one was located in the high-grade island region and had 27 levels. The fourth one was located in the core region of the Sword God Palace and had 36 levels. Yichen first arrived at the first Sword God Pagoda in the initial grade island region. As soon as he arrived, Yichen saw an initial grade sword saint leaving dejectedly. Clearly, he had failed the challenge. In the Sword God Palace, initial grade sword saints were the least numerous. This was because those who could become members of the Sword God Palace were all extremely talented and could quickly become intermediate grade sword saints. Of course, there were also some cases where some heaven-defying cultivators with extremely good aptitudes had the opportunity to join the Sword God Palace. As a result, they needed a long time to improve in the early stages. After all, there were very few people like Yichen. Not only was Yichen an initial grade sword saint as soon as he entered, but he also comprehended the law of complementation. It should be known that most high-grade sword saints, such as the Sweet Dew Sword Saint and the Shadowless Sword Saint, did not comprehend the law of complementation. After taking a deep breath, Yichen arrived at the first level of the Sword God Pagoda. Each level of the Sword God Pagoda was guarded by a puppet sword saint. If he wanted to pass through, he had to defeat the puppet sword saint. To Yichen, the puppet sword saint on the first level was too weak. With just a light strike, Yichen defeated it and arrived at the second level. After 10 minutes, Yichen passed the first level of the Sword God Pagoda. Ring. A sword ring rang out, and the Sword God Pagoda shone brightly. In the elementary Sword Saint Island region, many initial grade sword saints looked over from afar. Another person passed the 9th level. The 9th level is not very difficult. I have already made it to the 11th level. I wonder which level this person can reach. Most initial grade sword saints could make it to the 9th level. Hence, it was not surprising that people often passed the 9th level. One had to apply to enter the intermediate Sword Saint Island region. 3 days later, Yichen was allowed to enter the intermediate Sword Saint Island region. Yichen walked in front of the second Sword God Pagoda. He was allowed to pass through the first 9 levels. The 10th level, the 11th level, the 12th level. Yichen passed all the way to the 13th level in one go. Although the Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint had comprehended 15 types of divine arts, his overall strength was not much stronger than Yichen. This was because the Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint had only comprehended 2 types of divine arts. They were the divine arts of water and divine arts of fire. When he reached the 13th level, Yichen was finally stalled. Even after activating the 5 elemental divine arts, he was still unable to defeat the Puppet Sword Saint. The Puppet Sword Saint's attack was only slightly weaker than Yichen when he went all out, and Yichen's 5 elemental divine arts could not be sustained for long. Pooh! After dispersing the 5 elemental divine arts, Yichen was sent flying by the Puppet Sword Saint. He failed to pass the 13th level. A total of 499,500 contribution points. A satisfied smile appeared on Yichen's face. It was already very good to have such a result on his first time in the Sword God Pagoda. The contribution points were also sufficient to exchange for one or two of the 4 elementary Sword Tao Divine inscription diagrams. The first elementary Sword Tao Divine inscription diagram required 100,000 contribution points, the second 200,000 contribution points, the third 300,000 contribution points, the fourth 1,000,000 contribution points, so on and so forth. Back then, the elementary Sword Tao Divine inscription diagram that Yi Chun comprehended was not bad. It was the 5th one. After considering for a moment, Yi Chun decided to exchange for the first elementary Sword Tao Divine inscription diagram. Everything had to be done from the beginning. It was not a good habit to bite off more than one could chew. Only with a solid foundation would one be able to comprehend divine arts faster and faster. The first elementary Sword Tao Divine inscription diagram required 100,000 contribution points. There was still slightly over 300,000 left. Yi Chun was not in a hurry to use them. He wanted to comprehend the first Sword Tao Divine inscription diagram first. Chapter 1467. The first beginner sword pattern was a few clouds. Above the clouds, there was nothing, and the space below the clouds was shrinking rapidly. Looking at this picture, Yi Chun could not help but feel a sense of pride and heroism. As expected of a sword pattern, it can even affect my mood. Yi Chun couldn't help but think. Time passed slowly. Yi Chun spent most of his time comprehending the first beginner sword Tao pattern. The rest of his time was spent drinking with the Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint, or going out for a walk. Occasionally, he would use the God Transfer Array to go to the ancient Fragrance Castle and the Beast God Valley. Of course, using the God Transfer Array would cost him 10,000 contribution points. It was not a lot, but it was not a small amount either. If he used it frequently, it would be quite a burden. Green Lotus Sword Saint, Green Lotus Sword Saint. Today, Sword Saint Dan Yun came to Green Lotus Island. Sword Saint Dan Yun, what's up? Yi Chun walked out of the palace. Sword Saint Dan Yun laughed. I'm here to say goodbye. I'm afraid we won't be able to see each other often in the future. Hearing this, Yi Chun glanced at Sword Saint Dan Yun. You've become an intermediate sword saint. No wonder. Since intermediate sword saints lived on the islands, they wouldn't be able to see each other often. I was lucky. After I perfected the beginner technique, Sword Chi Dan Xia, I felt like I was about to break through. I've been stuck at this level for millions of years. Sword Saint Dan Yun was happy and emotional. He was different from Yi Chun. When he joined the Sword God Palace, he was just a heaven-defying cultivator. Now he was already an intermediate sword saint. His strength was comparable to ordinary demigods. No matter what, congratulations. Yi Chun clasped his hands and congratulated. Sword Saint Dan Yun laughed. I hope you can become an intermediate sword saint as soon as possible. At that time, we'll be able to meet each other often. Thank you. I hope so. Yi Chun had more opportunities than Sword Saint Dan Yun, but he wasn't sure if he could become an intermediate sword saint in a short period of time. He could only take one step at a time and let nature take its course. The two of them stayed together for a few days. After that, Sword Saint Dan Yun moved to the intermediate Sword Saint Island. Day after day, year after year, Yi Chun had been in the Heaven Domain's Sword God Palace for 45,000 years. He had also been comprehending the first elementary Sword Tao Divine rune diagram for 20,000 years. Success. According to the first beginner-level Sword Tao Divine Vein diagram, Yi Chun comprehended a new beginner-level divine technique, soaring clouds. The moment he comprehended Ling Yun, something strange happened to Yi Chun's body. His golden martial arts primordial spirit emerged from his body and burst forth with an eternal golden light. His body floated up involuntarily like a god. At this moment, Yi Chun naturally advanced to become an intermediate-level sword saint. The god blood in his body was constantly being refined and consumed, nourishing his martial Yuan soul. Intermediate sword saints were the most common group in the Sword God Palace. Without a fortuitous encounter, it was impossible to advance sword saint in hundreds of millions of years. Not everyone could obtain divine blood, and not everyone could use divine blood to break through to advanced Sword Saint. Most people could only use the long years to temper themselves and slowly improve. Green Lotus Sword Saint. Why did you come to the intermediate Sword Saint Island region? Wait, you've already become an intermediate level Sword Saint? Damn, this is too exaggerated. How long has it been? Seeing Yi Chun again, Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint was astonished. Yi Chun smiled. I've reached the critical point for a long time. Recently, I comprehended a divine technique and naturally broke through. To a demigod, 15,000 years could only be considered a short period of time. That's right, you're different from us. You've already established your foundation in the primal chaos battlefield. Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint quickly accepted this fact. Sometimes, comparing oneself to others would only make one angry. Fortuitous encounters were the same. You haven't attempted the Sword God Pagoda yet, right? Hurry up and try. I've already passed the 16th level. Not bad, right? The Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint had a smug look on his face. Passing through the 14th to the 16th level had given him more than 5 million contribution points. This was more than all the contribution points he had accumulated in the past combined. There was nothing he could do about it. The stronger he was, the more contribution points he would get, and the more contribution points he would get. For example, the Ultimate Sword Saints group had contribution points in the hundreds of millions. A few million was nothing to them. Not bad. I'll go challenge the Sword God Pagoda then. Before this, Yi Chun had already chosen the island to stay on. Now, he became a great Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint. Without any surprises, Yi Chun passed the 13th level of the Sword God Pagoda. The higher one's cultivation, the more powerful the divine technique would be. The Sword Saint puppet on the 13th level couldn't even withstand 3 strikes from Yi Chun. It was a world of difference from the first time he challenged the Sword God Pagoda. Soon, he passed the 14th level as well. Level 15. So powerful. Yi Chun used all his strength, but still couldn't defeat the Sword Saint puppet on the 14th level. He could only slightly suppress it. Usually, a victor wouldn't be determined in such a situation. If it was a battle of attrition, Yi Chun might not be able to defeat the Sword Saint puppet. The opponent was a puppet and could endlessly obtain energy from the Sword God Pagoda. Left with no choice, Yi Chun left the Sword God Pagoda. He couldn't pass the 15th level. Luckily, he had a lot of contribution points. He obtained another one, 2 million contribution points. Adding the contribution points from before, he had 5 million contribution points. With so many contribution points in hand, Yi Chun naturally wouldn't hide them. He exchanged for the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th level divine pattern diagrams, spending 900,000 contribution points. I still don't have enough contribution points in divine stones. Otherwise, I could get more 4-star Sky Saint treasured swords and upgrade the Firmament sword to 5 or 6 stars. The Sword God Palace had all kinds of Earth Saint treasured swords. However, Sky Saint treasured swords couldn't be exchanged because everyone needed Sky Saint treasured swords. Of course, everyone needed Earth Saint treasured swords even more. Sky Saint treasured swords were ultimately Earth Saint treasured swords. The reason why there were so many Earth Saint treasured swords was because the Sword God Palace had a sword forging divine tool. This sword forging divine tool could unceasingly forge Earth Saint treasured swords. Currently, Yi Chun had close to 300 divine stones. If he was lucky, he might be able to upgrade the Firmament sword to a 5-star Sky Saint treasure. However, this was too risky. 4 Sky Saint treasured swords, the failure rate would be much higher with every star. If he failed, if he was lucky, he would only damage the origin of the sword. If he was unlucky, the Sky Saint treasured sword would directly explode. Yi Chun gave up on this idea. For the 2nd elementary sword, Dao Divine Pattern Diagram, Yi Chun spent 21,000 years to comprehend a divine technique. For the 3rd elementary sword, Dao Divine Pattern, he spent 23,000 years. For the 4th elementary sword, Dao Divine Pattern Diagram, he spent 23,000 years to comprehend a divine technique. So far, Yi Chun had comprehended a total of 5 divine techniques. Among them, the most powerful one was still Drifting Blood. After all, drifting blood was a divine technique comprehended from the 5th elementary Sword Tao divine pattern diagram. Green Lotus Sword Saint. Let's go to Sword Heart Island together. During these years, Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint had already formed a habit. Every time he went to Sword Heart Island, he would drag Yi Chen along. There was a stone tablet on Sword Heart Island. On the stone tablet was the word sword, personally written by the sword god. The word sword in the sword god palace on the Scarlet Continent was merely a projection. The word sword, written by the sword god, was extremely profound. But correspondingly, it was also very powerful. Ordinary elementary sword saints wouldn't be able to enter Sword Heart Island. Although Yi Chun and Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint could enter, they couldn't stay for too long. They weren't able to endure the power of the word for too long. Other than that, after leaving Sword Heart Island, it would take a very long time before they could return. The power of the word would remain in their bodies for a very long time. Entering Sword Heart Island without waiting for it to dissipate would be an extremely foolish act. Chapter 1468. Sword Heart Island was vast and boundless. It was as big as the chaotic land. On the east side of Sword Heart Island stood a stone stele. This stone stele was huge, and it was 1,000,000 zhang tall. On the stone stele, there was a black word sword. The word sword was like a living creature, constantly moving about, as if it was executing a peerless sword art. However, upon closer inspection, the word sword had not moved at all. The word sword was special. It seemed to be able to transmit images through time and space. No matter how far it was, it could be seen. Of course, the farther away it was, the less power it had to bear. Correspondingly, it would be less enlightened. In front of the stone stele, there were many seats arranged in a fan shape. They were simple cushions. The cushions were far away from each other, so they wouldn't disturb others. There were thousands of rows. Yi Chun and Sword Saint stopped at the 2,500th row. Yi Chun said, "Sword Saint, I want to go a bit further." "All right, don't force yourself." The Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint had already gotten used to this. Although Yi Chen's overall power was not as strong as his ability to endure the power of the word was much stronger than his. In fact, the Sword Saint could still move forward a few hundred rows, but that would be close to his limit. It would be very hard to comprehend the word when he was close to his limit, and he would not be able to maintain it for a long time. Sword Saint found a seat nearby and sat down cross-legged. He started to look at the word. The word was too powerful. The entire Sword Heart Island felt like it was covered in mercury. The air was as heavy as water. Every step forward was a burden. Yi Chen stopped at the 1,800th row. Before condensing godly power, Yi Chen could only reach this point. If he went any further, he wouldn't be able to concentrate. Those who were in front of him were all sword saints who had condensed godly power. The word sword written by the sword god was boundlessly profound, as if it was the origin of the sword Tao. Looking at the word sword could not only improve one's heart energy, it could improve other aspects as well. Of course, this improvement couldn't be achieved overnight. It was like the absorption of nutrients. The better the absorption, the more nutrients one would absorb. As for those who couldn't absorb it well, they would still be able to improve after a long period of accumulation. Sensing the power of the word, Yi Chun tried his best to observe the word, trying to understand its profoundness. After 100 years, the Dan Yun Sword Saint left. Many people left, but many people came. The number of people didn't change much. It's Sword Saint Limitless. Sword Saint Limitless is here. A voice somehow reached Yi Chen's ears. Shifting his gaze away from the word, Yi Chen raised his head. A figure flew across the sky. This figure was not very tall and bald, but his back and shoulders were very wide and thick. He wore a gray robe and had a kind face. His eyes were very gentle, but this kind of gentleness was not one without anger. Instead, it was a gentleness that had seen through everything. Infinite Sword Saint. Yi Chen thought to himself. Limitless Sword Saint was one of the two ultimate sword saints of Sword God Palace. Apart from idealistic Sword Saint, he was the existence closest to the true God realm of Sword Tao. Of course, before becoming a true God, he was still in the realm of Sword Saint. His temperament was vastly different from that of a true god. Yichen quickly retracted his attention and continued reading the word. After 50 years, Yichen stood up. I have surpassed my limit. Yichen flew towards the exit of Swordheart Island as fast as lightning. Every time he came to Swordheart Island, Yichen would push himself to his limit and then surpass it. It was very dangerous. If he was lucky, he would go mad. If he was not lucky, his mind would break. It had happened before. The reason why Yichen dared to do this was because he didn't think it was as dangerous as he thought it would be. The limit of life wasn't fixed. Sometimes you thought it was your limit, but as long as you had a strong will, you could break it. Of course, don't overestimate your will. There was a limit to everything. The real danger was in this limit. If you could control it well, it wouldn't be too dangerous and you could improve quickly. If you didn't, something bad would happen sooner or later. I've improved again. After leaving Swordheart Island, Yichen sensed that his heart power was more condensed. When it was condensed to the extreme, it would give birth to the light of the soul, which was the sword of the soul. Mission Tower. Thousands of missions would be issued in the Mission Tower every day. According to the difficulty, the missions were divided into 9 levels. From low to high, they were 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, and the hardest 9-star. 1-star to 3-star missions corresponded to sword saints who hadn't condensed god power. 4-star to 6-star missions corresponded to sword saints who had condensed god power. 7-star to 9-star missions corresponded to ultimate sword saints, especially the 9-star missions. Only the idealistic sword saint and infinite sword saint had completed them. The mission tower had a total of 9 floors. The first floor corresponded to 1-star missions, the second floor corresponded to 2-star missions, and so on. The reward for 1-star missions wasn't very generous. The highest reward was 1,000. Although it could be accumulated, as long as one completed a lot of 1-star missions, one could still get a lot of contribution points. Yichen didn't want to go through so much trouble. The highest reward for 2-star missions was 5,000. The highest reward for 3-star missions was 30,000. The highest reward for 4-star missions was 200,000. However, it was too difficult. Only sword saints who had condensed god power could complete it. Capture spiritual clouds. 10,000 contribution points for each one you capture. Yichen had found a pretty good 3-star mission, which could be done repeatedly. Capturing 1 beam of spirit mist would complete the mission. The more you captured, the more contribution points you would get. A lot of sword saints were taking on this mission. This is it. Yichen accepted the mission. Spiritual clouds were a special kind of essence energy in the celestial realm. They were abundant in the spiritual cloud mountain range. Spiritual clouds could be used to refine sage artifacts, set up magic arrays, or fused with god power to increase the might of god power. The one who issued this mission was not an ordinary sword saint. It was one of the ultimate sword saints, the spiritual cloud sword saint. I'm afraid only an ultimate sword saint would be so rich. The reward for 1 spiritual cloud wasn't much, but 1,000 or 10,000 was a lot. Ordinary sword saints couldn't afford such a high reward. The spiritual cloud mountain range wasn't close to the sword god palace. There was no god's teleportation array between them, so one could only fly slowly. 10 years later, Yichen arrived at the spiritual cloud mountain range. The majestic spiritual cloud mountain range was like a divine mountain range. It was unfathomably deep and unfathomably tall. Everywhere was filled with spiritual light. It was clearly a blessed land of the celestial realm. Swish! After entering the spiritual cloud mountain range, Yichen suddenly discovered a ray of light chasing after an intermediate sword saint. This ray of light was as sharp as a sword. It was the spiritual cloud. Without much hesitation, Yichen's figure flashed. When he approached the spiritual cloud, he made a grabbing motion with his hand. The power of the 5 elements permeated out and enveloped the spiritual cloud. The spiritual cloud was still struggling and rampaging, causing Yichen's blood to boil. He was inwardly shocked. No wonder it's a 3-star mission. If I hadn't comprehended the 5 elements and could use the power of the 5 elements, I wouldn't have been able to capture the spiritual cloud so easily. Capturing spiritual clouds wasn't like fighting. divine skills were useless. One could only rely on one's own strength. Chapter 1469. My name is Radiant Star. May I know your name? Seeing that the light cloud was captured, the mid-grade sword saint's silhouette flickered as he flew over. My name is Green Lotus. Yichen replied, Green Lotus Sword Saint, I wonder if you could return the light cloud to me? The Radiant Star Sword Saint felt somewhat depressed. Earlier, although he was being chased by the light cloud, the actual situation wasn't like that. The light cloud could only be captured, it couldn't be forcefully attacked. Otherwise, it would reach the limit of the light cloud's endurance and shatter. Hence, the Radiant Star Sword Saint had no way to display his strength and could only rely on his physical strength to capture the light cloud. Evidently, Yichen hadn't heard of this before and was somewhat startled. The tone of the Radiant Star Sword Saint wasn't rude and unreasonable. Yichen didn't feel that the Radiant Star Sword Saint was being unreasonable. Seeing that Yichen didn't seem to know anything, the Radiant Star Sword Saint told Yichen about the light cloud. So that's the case. I was too rash. Yichen returned the light cloud to the Radiant Star Sword Saint. The Radiant Star Sword Saint had an embarrassed expression on his face. Speaking of which, I was the one who benefited. If not, I would need at least 10 days to capture this light cloud. Unwilling to take advantage of Yichen, the Radiant Star Sword Saint shared his experience with Yichen. Usually, when the air is agitated, it means that there's a light cloud nearby. Remember, don't go to the depths of the valley. Although there are many light clouds there, there's a high possibility of being surrounded and attacked by many. When a number of light clouds reaches a certain level, a light cloud beast will be formed. The strength of the light cloud beast is extremely terrifying. Even the elementary divine technique I comprehended from the 420th divine inscription diagram was unable to injure it. And even if you could injure it, it would only cause it to dissipate. Hearing the Radiant Star Sword Saint's explanation, Yichen nodded his head repeatedly. These are my experiences. You should be careful. Many thanks for the information. These experiences were extremely useful to Yichen. After chatting for a while, the two of them separated. The first one he caught was 5 years later. Although there were a lot of spirit clouds in the Spirit Cloud Mountain, it was way too huge and the spirit clouds were hidden too deep. It would not come out easily. This was the second spirit cloud that Yichen had seen in 5 years. 10,000. Yichen wasn't anxious at all. He was already prepared to stay here for a long time. The second one was 20 years later, the third 35 years later, and the fourth 52 years later. After 100 years, Yichen had captured 7 spirit clouds. Although it didn't seem like much, the efficiency was actually quite high. Many times, discovering the spirit clouds didn't mean that one could capture them. If it were any other sword saint, being able to capture 1 spirit cloud in 100 years would already be a great achievement. Most importantly, without comprehending complementary laws, sword saints couldn't carry too many spirit clouds. Yichen had the 5-element space, which could store spirit clouds, but other sword saints didn't. Therefore, every time they captured a spirit cloud, they would have to return, which would take 20 years. In the blink of an eye, Yichen had stayed in the Spirit Cloud Mountain range for 5,000 years. In these 5,000 years, Yichen had obtained 300 light clouds, which was 3 million contribution points. To Yichen, this was definitely a windfall. Of course, to sword saints who had condensed divine power, this was probably just a small fortune. Every level had their own values. For an ultimate sword saint, 100 or 2 million wasn't much at all. No one would be so bored as to come here to capture the spiritual clouds. If they had the time, they could do more meaningful things. The 5-element space can't take it anymore. Originally, Yichen wanted to stay for a while longer and gather 1,000 beams of spirit clouds. However, the 5-element space had its limit. Although 300 beams of spirit clouds seemed to be a lot gentler after being captured, they still possessed a powerful destructive power. The inside of Yichen's 5-element space was now full of holes. After returning to Sword God Palace, Yichen went to the mission tower and chose to submit the mission. I've already transferred 3 million contribution points to you. The mission tower also had a puppet sword saint. They were all sentient and were in charge of a large amount of contribution points. These contribution points were all transferred over by the person who issued the mission. Those who completed the mission would be able to obtain a corresponding amount of contribution points from the puppet sword saint. Evidently, the cloudy spirit sword saint had transferred a large amount of contribution points to the puppet sword saint. In front of Yi Chun, there were many people submitting this mission. The mission tower had a special storage space. After a period of time, the cloudy spirit sword saint would come over to collect the light clouds. Not being able to see the cloudy spirit sword saint, Yi Chun felt a little regretful. The ultimate sword saint was extremely elusive. Yi Chun had only seen the Snowheart sword saint and the limitless sword saint. Although the ultimate sword saint would be on the Sword Heart Island, the distance was too far and it was basically impossible to see him. Everyone could only see the word sword. The reason why he was able to see the limitless sword saint was because the limitless sword saint just so happened to pass by the vicinity of Yi Chun. 3 million contribution points. In addition to my own contribution points, I have a total of 3,600,000 contribution points. I should be able to exchange for the 6th to 9th beginner stage divine inscription diagrams. However, there's no rush for now. He wasn't in a hurry to exchange for it, nor was he in a hurry to comprehend the divine arts. Yi Chun decided to first earn enough contribution points before doing anything else. The second time, Yi Chun spent 5,500 years to capture 300 streams of light clouds. The third time, Yi Chun spent 4,800 years to capture 300 streams of light clouds. The 10th time, Yi Chun spent 5,200 years to capture 300 streams of light clouds. After 10 times, Yi Chun earned a total of 30 million contribution points. And after 50,000 years, Yi Chun even took some time to go to the Sword Heart Island to look at the word sword. In any case, he didn't spend too much time looking at the word sword. Coincidentally, after submitting the mission for the 10th time, the Cloudy Spirit Sword Saint's mission was canceled. It should be because the amount of light clouds was sufficient. After exchanging for the 6th to 10th beginner stage divine inscription diagrams, Yi Chun started his closed-door meditation. 200,000 years passed in a flash. Yi Chun had comprehended 5 different divine arts. The divine art he comprehended from the 10th beginner stage divine inscription diagram was Blade Heart. As the 10th divine art, the might of Blade Heart was much stronger than the 5th divine art, Floating Blood. However, it was still insufficient to help Yi Chun pass the 15th level of the Sword God Pagoda. After some consideration, Yi Chun exchanged for the 100th beginner stage divine inscription diagram. 120,000 years passed. On the Green Lotus Island, Chi, 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 Chi. In the sky above the vast and empty island, the void seemed to have split apart. The sky was filled with cross-shaped cracks, and within the cross-shaped cracks, a strange luster flowed like blood and ink. 100th divine art, soul severing. So powerful. These 10 million contribution points were not spent in vain. The higher the level of the divine inscription diagrams, the more terrifying the divine arts would be. The Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint's strength was much weaker than Yi Chun's, but by relying on the 350th divine art, Sword Chi Danxia, he forcibly passed the 17th level of the Sword God Pagoda. From this, one could very well imagine how great the increase in strength of a divine art was. After I completely perfect soul severing, I can challenge the Sword God Pagoda again. Comprehension and perfection were two different things. In these hundreds of thousands of years, Yi Chun had already perfected the first 10 divine arts. He believed that perfecting soul severing wouldn't take too long. Chapter 1470. I can't. After a while, you will be stronger than me. Dan Yin Sword Saint was upset. Yi Chun was improving way too fast. He had mastered the 350th godly skill, Sword Chi Danxia. When he waved his sword, the sword Chi was like a red cloud, but he still couldn't suppress Yi Chun. Yi Chun's 100th godly skill, Soul Slash, kept tearing him apart. Again, the best way to perfect a godly skill was to fight. As he fought with Danyin Sword Saint, Yi Chen's soul slash was getting better and better. Of course, it was also because Snow Heart Sword Saint had practiced the 100th godly skill, but his 100th godly skill was called Cold Heart Slash. Come on, I'm going to try my best. Danyin Sword Saint looked serious. The sword chi became denser, like the red clouds in the sky, red like blood. Like the spring wind and rain, Yi Chen's soul slash was broken by the sword chi. It was no longer as strong as before. Puff! Finally, Yi Chen couldn't block Danyin Sword Saint's attack anymore, and he was blown away. Even though Danyin Sword Saint didn't master the complementarity element, his fire element and water element were at a high level, at least higher than Yi Chen's. After all, he hadn't been cultivating for a long time. However, fire element and water element were much weaker than the 5 elements, so it didn't matter how high his level was. In terms of godly skills, Danyin Sword Saint was much stronger than Yi Chen. The 100th godly skill couldn't compare to the 350th godly skill. Danyin Sword Chi Danxia was perfected, while Yi Chen's soul slash was still lacking. Therefore, when Danyin Sword Saint got serious, Yi Chen wasn't a match for him. He was easily blown away. Impressive. Yi Chen flipped in the air and landed on the ground. They were just fighting, so Danyin Sword Saint didn't use too much power. He held back at the critical moment. Otherwise, Yi Chen wouldn't have gotten out of it. Don't compliment me. My godly skills are just a bit better than yours. The Dan Cloud Sword Saint smiled bitterly. With the Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint as his training partner, Yi Chen's speed of perfecting his soul slash had increased by leaps and bounds. Most importantly, he had seen the Snow Heart Sword Saint perform the 100th divine skill, and its charm had been imprinted in his mind for a long time. Relying on his frightening comprehension of the Sword Tao, Yi Chen had shortened the time required for perfecting the soul slash by hundreds of times. It had only taken him 2,000 years to completely perfect the soul slash, which was much faster than perfecting the previous 10 divine skills. On the 15th floor of the Sword God Pagoda. On the 16th floor of the Sword God Pagoda. After perfecting the divine technique, soul severing, Yi Chen immediately went to challenge the divine Sword Pagoda. He went from the 14th floor to the 16th floor and obtained close to 5 million contribution points. In this way, Yi Chen's current contribution points were still more than 21 million. My Soul Slayer has already been perfected. It's about time for me to exchange for an even better elementary level Sword Tao Divine Inscription Diagram. No matter who it was, there was no limit to the pursuit of godly skills. Yi Chen was no exception. After spending 20 million contribution points, Yi Chen exchanged for the 200th beginner level Sword Doctrine Divine pattern. This Sword Tao Divine Inscription Diagram had a cluster of stamens drawn on it. The brushwork was still that extremely simple style. With just a few light strokes, it was extremely lifelike and contained boundless profundities. In the center of the Heaven Realm, there was a plane that was as old as the Heaven Realm. The plane was boundless and had no beginning or end. Here, it was always in a state of dusk. Even the main god sun and true god stars couldn't shine on this place. There was an extremely ominous aura in this place. The Twilight Plane was one of the most dangerous places in the Heaven Realm since ancient times. Other than the law of primal chaos, there was also the law of dusk that covered the Twilight Plane. The law of dusk was the absolute law of all things. Anyone who stayed here for a long time would be on the decline. True gods were no exception. However, the Twilight Plane had always been a lively place. Every time a god war broke out, the Twilight Plane would definitely be one of the main battlefields. Many true gods had fallen here, and the number of demigods that had fallen here was as many as the stars in the sky. The number of demigods that had fallen here was countless times more than the number of demigods that were still alive in the Heaven Realm. Because true gods had fallen here, the Twilight Plane was also an important source of godstones. The flesh and blood of true gods mixed with the soil of the Twilight Plane would form godstone mines or godstone pits. Of course, with the passage of time, the exposed godstone mines and godstone pits were long gone. The remaining godstone mines and godstone pits were all hidden under the Twilight Plane. It wasn't an easy task to find them. Other than godstone mines and godstone pits, The Twilight Plane was also a place where demigods fought each other. Every true god force had a god's transfer array that led to the Twilight Plane. In the Twilight Plane, killing a demigod from the Divine Alliance could earn a certain amount of contribution points. For example, killing a primary battle saint and obtaining their token would earn 1 million contribution points. Killing an intermediate battle saint would earn 10 million contribution points. Killing an advanced battle saint would earn 1 billion contribution points. Killing an ultimate battle saint would earn 100 billion contribution points. This was only for demigods from ordinary true god forces. Demigods from main god forces were worth even more. Killing a primary battle saint from a main god's force would give him 10 million contribution points. Killing an intermediate battle saint from a main god's force would give him 100 million contribution points. Killing an advanced battle saint from a main god's force would give him 10 billion contribution points. Killing an ultimate battle saint from a main god's force would give him 1 trillion contribution points. That's right, a direct increase of 10 times. Demigods from main god forces were too monstrous and too difficult to kill. To the Sword Sages of the Sword God Palace, the contribution points obtained from clearing the Sword God Pagoda could only be obtained once and couldn't be repeated. If they wanted to obtain more contribution points, they had to clear the higher floors, complete missions, or come to the Twilight Plane. Compared to completing missions, killing demigods from the Divine Alliance was much faster. However, the prerequisite was that one had to be strong enough. This was the first time Yi Chun came to the Twilight Plane. Accompanying him were the Scarlet Cloud Sword Sage and the Radiance Star Sword Sage. The Radiant Star Sword Sage was even stronger than the Scarlet Cloud Sword Sage. He had comprehended the 420th divine skill, Vast Star Transformation. So this is the Twilight Plane? It had been 150,000 years since Yi Chun comprehended the 200th primary sword, Dao, divine pattern. Yi Chun had successfully comprehended the 200th divine skill, Sword Flower in full bloom. With the help of Sword Flower in full bloom, Yi Chun had passed the 17th floor of the Sword God Pagoda. His strength was now at the same level as the Scarlet Cloud Sword Sage and the Radiant Star Sword Sage. Sensing that their strength was increasing slowly and the difficulty of earning contribution points had increased, the three of them decided to venture into the Twilight Plane. With the three of them working together, it was still possible for them to kill an intermediate battle saint. When the time came, they would split the contribution points evenly and each of them would obtain more than 3 million contribution points. If they could kill a few more battle saints, this trip would not be in vain. Of course, searching for divine stones was also one of their goals. Be careful. Other than enemy demigods, there are also Twilight evil spirits in the Twilight Plane. This wasn't the first time the Radiant Star Sword Sage had come to the Twilight Plane. He couldn't help but remind Yi Chun and the Scarlet Cloud Sword Sage. I have never seen a Twilight evil spirit before. I heard that it is very difficult to deal with. It is formed by the resentment of the Twilight Plane. The Scarlet Cloud Sword Sage's solemn face was filled with curiosity. Chapter 1471. Dusk evil spirits are very frightening. The weakest dusk evil spirit is stronger than us, and the strongest dusk evil spirits are even feared by ultimate battle saints. Dusk evil spirits come in all shapes and sizes, and each form has a different fighting style. You have to be careful of those incomparably huge dusk evil spirits. Usually, these dusk evil spirits have a wide attack range, and you won't be able to escape even if you want to. The Radiant Star Sword Saint told them everything he knew. Don't worry, we can always escape if we can't beat them, unless we are unlucky and encounter a gigantic dusk evil spirit. The Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint smiled. Flying above the Dusk Plane, Yi Chun's group was very cautious. There were more dusk evil spirits in the Dusk Plane than they had imagined. After a month, they had already encountered more than a dozen. The dusk evil spirits came in all shapes and sizes. Some looked like trees, and only when they attacked would they be noticed. Some looked like centipedes, burrowing out from the ground. Some were flat and spread on the ground like a large lawn. There were also dusk evil spirits that floated in the sky. They were transparent and difficult to scan with soul power. A few days ago, the three were almost surrounded by a dusk evil spirit in the form of a lawn. With the strength of the dusk evil spirits and the frightening power of the dusk law, they were not far from death. The dust plane is much more dangerous than I imagined. The Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint sighed. The Radiance Star Sword Saint said, "Get used to it. As long as we are careful, there won't be any accidents." Be careful. Yichen nodded. Although the dusk evil spirits were hard to guard against, they were not very fast. Another month passed in a flash, and the three found a prey. According to the aura of the token, they could determine that the opponent was a demigod of the Dark Alliance. The one who discovered this demigod was Yichen. The Netherworld's sacred eye allowed him to lock onto the opponent from far away, and the opponent was completely unaware. Just in case, the three flanked from three directions. Kill! Yichen attacked first. A soul slash was unleashed, and the void cracked, emitting a pitch-black light. A powerful suction force locked onto the opponent. This was a demigod with blood-red tentacles on his head. His eyes were like light bulbs, and he was extremely frightening. However, he was panicking at this moment. Yichen's attack was much stronger than his. Even though they were both demigods, there were still differences. Puff! His body exploded, and this demigod turned into a streak of bloody light that shot out, escaping from Soul Slayer's range. This was the blood escape technique of the Law of Blood. Sword Chi Red Glow. The Dan Cloud Sword Saint stopped him. His red sword chi was like clouds in the sky, covering the blood light. Needless to say, it was not easy to kill a mid-level demigod who had comprehended the precepts. After all, this was not the Chaos battlefield. The mid-level demigods in the Chaos battlefield did not comprehend the precepts. In the Heaven realm, although most of the mid-level demigods did not comprehend the precepts, there were still quite a few who had comprehended the precepts. This was especially so for the forces of the main gods. Every member of the forces had comprehended the precepts and had cultivated for countless years. After breaking through the sword chi, the blood-red light shot in another direction. Star's transformation. The Radiance Star Sword Sage's attack had arrived. The Radiant Star Sword Saint's attacks were even more powerful than the Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint's and Yichen's attacks. As soon as he used his 420th skill, the sword chi filled the sky, as if countless stars were blinking. Pu. The bloody light was riddled with holes and was forced to reveal itself. Sword Flower Blooming. Sword Chi Red Glow. Yichen and the Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint, who had rushed over, released their divine skills together and attacked. Not bad, we killed one. The three of them were very happy to have killed a mid-level battle saint. After all, this was 10 million contribution points. Compared to challenging the sword god Pagoda, killing a hostile demigod from the Divine Alliance was much easier, and more contribution points could be obtained. Of course, it was also very dangerous. It was very possible that you would become someone else's prey. The danger came so suddenly. After the three of them killed 3 mid-level battle saints, they suddenly encountered an advanced battle saint. Moreover, it was an advanced battle saint from a main god's force. Advanced battle saint from main god's force had almost 100% condensed godly power and comprehended the precepts. Haha. Battle Saint Rider was an advanced battle saint from the God of Destruction Palace. His strength was not considered outstanding among the advanced battle saints of the God of Destruction Palace. He was just an ordinary member, but he was more than enough to deal with 3 mid-level sword saints. The giant scimitar slashed out, and the plane below the three of them instantly cracked. It was as if a demon had opened its mouth. Pooh! The Radiant Star Sword Saint comprehended the Starlight precepts. His starlight form was merely grazed by the blade energy, and the starlight immediately dissipated. He was seriously injured, and more than 10% of his martial yuan shun was obliterated. The Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint comprehended the fire and water precepts. Even though he was using the fire travel technique, his fire travel technique was also destroyed by the blade energy. He was also seriously injured and fell to the ground, creating a large hole in the plane. Yichen was even more unlucky. Battle Saint Rider had focused his attack on him, so the blade energy directly hit him. Fortunately, Yi Chun used the 5 elemental fire escape technique. With the protection of the 5 elemental precepts, this blade energy obliterated less than 10% of his martial Yuan Shun. The injury he suffered was similar to that of the Radiant Star Sword Saint and the Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint. Is this the strength of a powerful demigod? To be honest, this was the first time Yi Chun saw the true strength of a powerful demigod. Although the Sweet Dew Sword Saint and the Shadowless Sword Saint had shown some of their strength, they had not really fought with Yi Chun on the Chaos battlefield. Although the level 9 Chaos creatures were comparable to powerful demigods, they were not good at using the precepts. You are indeed different after comprehending the complementary precepts. Battle Saint Rider grinned. An ordinary intermediate Battle Saint would definitely not be able to block a single blade attack from him. Only those who comprehended the complementary precepts would be able to become ultimate Battle Saints in the end. If that's the case, then I won't be able to tolerate you. Battle Saint Rider's killing intent intensified. Fierce Tiger slash. With a slash, the blade energy transformed into a ferocious tiger that pounced towards Yi Chun's group. This was not an ordinary blade art, but a divine skill. He did not even use his full strength in the first slash. Too powerful. The Radiant Star Sword Saint and the Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint were about to lose all hope. Tears of ice and snow. Suddenly, a teardrop flew over from afar and froze the ferocious tiger blade energy. Then, it pierced through Battle Saint Rider's forehead. Crack, crack, crack. Battle Saint Rider's entire body turned into an ice sculpture and shattered. His martial Yuan Shun immediately collapsed. This meant that the power of the attack had far exceeded the limits of his martial Yuan Shun. It Sword Saint Snowheart. Yi Chun turned his head to look. Beside the silver-haired Sword Saint Snowheart were other high-level Sword Saints, as well as some Battle Saints that Yi Chun did not recognize. Without exception, these people were all high-level demigods who had condensed godly power and comprehended the precepts. This meant that none of them were weaker than Battle Saint Rider, at least not by much. It's dangerous here. There will be a hunting operation soon. Retreat to the back and do not approach this place. Sword Saint Snowheart said calmly. Thank you, Sword Saint Snowheart, for saving us. Let's go. Radiant Star Sword Saint and Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint cupped their fists and hurriedly left. You can also thank them and follow behind. Chapter 1472. The Twilight Plane was too dangerous for Yi Chun and the other two. The three of them decided that they would never come back to the Twilight Plane before they condensed their divine power. Time passed quickly. It had been 2 million years since Yi Chun came to the Heaven Realm. Dugaju and the others had mostly come to the Heaven Realm. Those who didn't had either died of old age, died in battle, or died in the chaotic battlefield. During this time, Murong Qingsheng and Su Jing had both become beginner demigods. From now on, their lifespans exceeded 100 million years. During this time, Yi Chun had comprehended the 300th and 400th beginner divine skill. His strength had increased to the next level, and he had passed the 18th floor of the Sword God Tower. However, the one who improved the most was the Radiant Star Sword Saint. Tens of thousands of years ago, the Radiant Star Sword Saint had condensed the Sword of Soul. He had been refining his divine power for the past tens of thousands of years. The last time he came out, he had actually reached the 25th floor of the Sword God Tower. One should know that the higher one went, the more difficult it would be. From now on, the Radiant Star Sword Saint is no longer on the same level as us. The Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint sighed. Yes. Yi Chun nodded. Almost all the battle sages of Overgod forces had comprehended the laws. Therefore, whether or not they condensed their divine power was the dividing line between the strong and the weak. Without condensing their divine power, it didn't matter if they were beginner battle sages or advanced battle sages, they were all weak. Once they condensed their divine power, even if they were beginner battle sages, they were still strong. Before condensing his godly power, Radiant Star Sword Saint was only a bit stronger than them. But after condensing his godly power, Radiant Star Sword Saint would only need a light sword strike to kill them. Yichen estimated that the current Radiant Star Sword Saint was a lot stronger than Battle Saint Ride. After all, Radiant Star Sword Saint had comprehended Starlight Law, which was a powerful law second only to peak laws. We need to work hard too. We need to condense the Sword of Soul and refine our divine power as soon as possible. The Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint clenched his fist. Those who had comprehended the laws of nature and were able to refine divine energy were powerful demigods. Among overgod forces, the majority of high-rank battle saints were powerful demigods. The majority of high-rank sword saints in Sword God Palace were also powerful demigods. Intermediate rank battle saints and sword saints were much rarer. Only 1 out of 10 could become a powerful demigod. Normally, only the elites could refine divine energy at the intermediate rank and become a powerful demigod. As for Ultimate Battle Sage, that was an even higher level, so he couldn't think about it for now. I will. Yichun felt that he had already touched the threshold of the Sword of the Soul and was only 1 step away. As usual, Yichun would head to Sword Heart Island to look at the word after the power of the word dissipated. Yichun had been in the Heaven Realm for 1,500,000 years. The Radiant Star Sword Sage arrived at Green Lotus Island, laughing heartily. Yichun and Danyan Sword Saint were there, drinking and chatting. Bright Star Sword Saint, have you already converted all of your power into godly power? Yichun asked. Bright Star Sword Saint picked up a cup of wine and gulped it down. Not bad. After spending several 100,000 years, I've finally converted all of my power into godly power. Godly power was the fusion of all of one's power, which was why it was so powerful. Congratulations. Yichun and Danyan Sword Saint hurriedly toasted Bright Star Sword Saint. Although he wasn't on the same level as Yichun and Danyan Sword Saint, Bright Star Sword Saint didn't put on airs and said, "You guys have to work hard too. Once you condense the Sword of the Soul, you'll be able to comprehend divine skills very quickly, and your comprehension of laws will also increase very quickly. Without reaching this level, you won't know how wonderful it is. We've known this for a long time. Unfortunately, condensing the Sword of the Soul isn't that easy." Danyan Sword Saint smiled bitterly. "I'm preparing to go to the Twilight Plane again to see if I can get some divine stones to upgrade my Sky Saint artifact. It's a pity that I can't go with you guys." Bright Star Sword Saint was very confident in his own strength. At his level, unless it was an ultimate battle sage, even if his opponent was stronger than him, it would still be very difficult to kill him. Be careful. Yes, don't be careless. Don't worry. I won't be so unlucky as to meet an enemy ultimate battle sage. Sword Heart Island. Yichun didn't know how many times he had come to Sword Heart Island. Sometimes he went alone, and sometimes he came with Danyan Sword Saint. As he observed the word, time passed by bit by bit. Sword Heart Island contained the powerful power of the word. Time obviously slowed down a lot. 100 years inside was longer than 10,000 years outside. Unknowingly, Yichun's body started to emit a faint heart force. Although this heart force was faint and faintly discernible, it was extremely sharp. Immediately after, the word in Yichun's eyes started to change. First, he practiced countless divine-level sword arts. In the blink of an eye, more than 1,000 primary divine-level sword arts were all practiced. The speed was so fast that it made people's hair stand on end. Yichun couldn't react at all. His sea of soul was surging. In another blink of an eye, more than 50 intermediate divine-level sword arts were also practiced, followed by 3 advanced divine-level sword arts. After 3 blinks of an eye, the word sword turned into a figure that was sitting cross-legged. This figure was blurry, but the power it gave off caused the world to fall silent. Yichun had a feeling that this was the image of the sword god. Soul Sword. Someone has created a soul sword. Sword Heart Island became lively. Many sword saints looked at the place where the heart force waves were extremely intense. There, an illusory divine sword was being born. In the center of the illusory divine sword was a human figure. Is this the spirit sword? At this moment, Yichun was in a mysterious realm. He felt that he was omnipotent and that there was nothing that could stump him. He felt that he was incomparably strong. This strength was not external, but internal. Apart from that, his extremely powerful heart allowed him to have absolute control over his various powers. This was probably the key to refining divine power and becoming a powerful demigod. I've finally come to this step. Yichen was filled with anticipation. After the radiant star sword, Saint refined his divine power. His strength would become unbelievably strong. Yichen himself had comprehended the complementary laws of nature and the 5 elements. He wondered how strong he would become after he refined his divine power. Other than that, Yichen was more concerned about the fact that he had 3 supreme sword intents. Could it be that the 3 supreme sword intents would all be integrated into his divine power? Divine power was the fusion of all powers, and sword intents were included. There's no rush. Yichen was familiarizing himself with the spirit sword. My spirit sword is blue in color. Gradually, the realm of the spirit sword stabilized, and Yichen discovered that his spirit sword was blue in color. The spirit sword was also the light of the soul. On the surface, the light of the soul referred to the light emitted from one's heart. Since it was the light emitted from one's heart, it would naturally have a color. The color varied from person to person. For people with a dark heart, the light of the soul would also be dark. For people with a bright heart, the light of the soul would also be bright. It reflected the nature of a person's heart. Yichen's spirit sword was blue in color. This color was on the cold side, but very pure. It was in line with Yichen's nature. He was cold, but very righteous. Chapter 1473. After leaving Sword Heart Island, Yichen immediately went into seclusion. He needed time to refine divine power. This was a huge project. Under the control of the Sword of Spirit, Yichen gathered all the power in his body to his heart. The heart was the center of divine power and also the place where divine power was produced. After all, the Sword of Spirit was also born from the heart. It was as if all the streams had returned to the origin. All the power gathered. First was the inextinguishable power of the spirit body, followed by the sword energy and chi, then the sword domain and sword intent. Apart from the laws, all of Yichen's power gathered at his heart. The whole heart gave off a colorful light, jumping and vibrating. Fortunately, it was protected by the Sword of Spirit, so it wouldn't explode. Fuse. The existence of the Sword of Spirit allowed Yichen to control so many powers with ease. Taking a deep breath, Yichen started to fuse the powers and refine divine power, strand by strand. Refining divine power was very slow. If Yichen's original power was the vast ocean, then the process of refining divine power was like drawing seawater into a river. The river seemed wide, but compared to the ocean, it was not worth mentioning. No wonder the radiant Star Sword Saint had spent hundreds of thousands of years to convert all the power in his body into divine power. However, what excited Yichen was that the 3 supreme sword intents were all fused and converted into divine power. This meant that Yichen's divine power had 2 more types of power than others. Let's see how powerful the divine power is. 100 years later, the divine power in Yichen's body began to take shape. It was a blue power, very vast and pure. He flicked his finger, and a blue finger force flew out. Boom! Terrifying ripples appeared in the sky. Time and space were distorted. The entire Sword God Palace was enveloped by a formless power. Green Lotus Island was the same. In the past, when Yichen used his full power, he couldn't even cause the formless power to move. Now, with a flick of his finger, he had such power. One could imagine how big the difference was. Amazing. Just the divine power alone is already stronger than my previous attack. If I used the divine skill, Yichen couldn't estimate his own power anymore. He had to challenge the Sword God Pagoda to find out. Green Lotus Sword Saint, you've already condensed the Sword of Spirit? One day, Sword Saint Dan Yun came to Green Lotus Island. He had just returned from his mission and learned that Yichen had condensed the Sword of Soul, so he immediately rushed over. Not bad. Yichen nodded and called Sword Saint Dan Yun over. Congratulations. I wonder when I'll be able to reach this step. Scarlet Cloud's Sword Saint was incomparably envious. He had become a mid-grade Sword Saint a step earlier than Yichen, but he didn't expect Yi Chun to surpass him. I was lucky. Condensing the Sword of Spirit was not something that one could control. When the time was right, it was naturally done. From now on, you are also a powerhouse, and you are even stronger than the Radiant Star Sword Saint. I don't think anyone below the ultimate Battle Saint level can kill you. Sword Saint Danyan knew Yi Chun very well. Not only did Yi Chun comprehend the complementary laws of 5 elements, but he also had the 3 supreme sword intents. His foundation was much better than the Radiant Star Sword Saints. Excluding the ultimate Battle Saints, if the Radiant Star Sword Saint was considered ordinary, then Yi Chun was definitely in the upper tier. Although he wasn't at the peak, at least the peak wouldn't be able to kill him easily. Another 100,000 years passed. Yi Chun had already transformed 1/3 of his divine power. The divine power in his body was surging like the sea. Just like what the Radiant Star Sword Saint had said, after condensing the Sword of Spirit, the speed at which one's law level increased was at least 100 times faster. In 100,000 years, the speed at which one's law level increased was much faster than before. Sword God Pagoda. Yi Chun started from the 19th floor, the 20th floor, the 21st floor, the 22nd floor, the 23rd floor, the 24th floor. Yi Chun effortlessly passed the 24th floor. This floor was the level of the Radiance Star Sword Saint. The 25th floor, the 26th floor, the 27th floor. When he reached the 28th floor, Yi Chun finally stopped. The 32nd floor and above is the level of the Ultimate Sword Saint. I'm still 5 floors away from the Ultimate Sword Saint. These 5 floors were not to be underestimated. Every floor was extremely difficult to pass. The reason why Ultimate Battle Saints were called Ultimate Battle Saints was because not only did they complement each other, but their divine power was also quite perfect. However, Yi Chun's divine power was not perfect. His sword origin, sword domain, and sword intent were all not perfect. Thus, the divine power formed from their fusion was naturally not perfect. Reaching the 28th floor, which was the same as passing the 27th floor, rewarded quite a lot of contribution points. Passing the 19th floor rewarded 26 million contribution points. Passing the 20th floor rewarded 52 million contribution points. Passing the 21st floor, 100 million. Passing the 22nd floor, 200 million. Passing the 23rd floor, 400 million. Passing the 24th floor, 800 million. Passing the 25th floor, 6 billion. Passing the 26th floor, 2 billion. Passing the 27th floor, 4 billion. A total of 8 billion contribution points. Another 400,000 years passed. Yi Chun had been in the heaven realm for 2 million years. Yi Chun had already converted all his power into divine power and comprehended the 500th primary godly skill, Shattering Heart Sword. In 5 million years, Yi Chun comprehended the 600th and 700th primary godly skill. In the 300th year, he comprehended the 800th primary godly skill. It's getting hard. Yi Chun faintly felt that it was getting harder to comprehend primary godly skills. The higher the level, the harder it was to comprehend. Although his comprehension ability had increased a lot after condensing the Sword of Soul, sometimes a high comprehension ability was not as useful as a deep foundation. For example, if Yi Chun was given a middle-level godly skill, Yi Chun would not be able to comprehend it. This required an incomparably deep foundation. Sword Saint Snowheart comprehended more than 200 primary godly skills not because he had nothing better to do, but to build his own foundation. In 8 million years, Sword Saint Scarlet Cloud also condensed the Sword of Soul. The Radiance Star Sword Saint and Yi Chun's existence had more or less stimulated him. Now, he had converted more than half of his divine power. He had even met up with Yi Chun some time ago, so he was in a very good mood. I have to slowly build my foundation. Good preparation is the key to success. The eruption of power exhausted Yi Chun's potential. Yi Chun did not expect to achieve much in just a few million years. Those ultimate sword saints had all spent tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of years to cultivate and accumulate. If a primary demigod could live for more than 100 million years, a powerful demigod who had condensed divine power could be said to have eternal life. They could live for at least 10 billion years. They had enough time to accumulate. After challenging the sword god Pagoda, Yi Chen successfully passed the 28th level and obtained 12.8 billion contribution points. He was only 4 levels away from becoming an ultimate sword saint. Although the contribution points were a lot, he knew that it was still not enough to exchange for the beginner sword Dao pattern. It should be known that the 1000th beginner sword Dao pattern required 100 million contribution points, and exchanging for 1/5 of a beginner sword Dao pattern would require an astronomical amount of contribution points. Tens of billions of contribution points were nothing to him. Hence, Yi Chen decided to head to the Twilight Plains again to search for divine stones and hunt for battle sages of the Divine Union. Chapter 1474. Boom, boom, boom. On the Twilight Plain, the sound waves shook the sky and the ground cracked. Two figures kept clashing, exchanging thousands of blows in an instant. Every time they clashed, a chaotic light would appear. One of the black figures was a battle sage demon with 2 horns on his head. His aura was very similar to the first demon ancestor, as if they came from the same source. The blue figure was Yi Chen. You have the bloodline of the great demon ancestor. During the battle, Yi Chen still had the energy to speak. The demon sneered, "That's right. In our demon god palace, everyone has the bloodline of the great demon ancestor. Our bloodline is the noblest, and I, demon saint, come from the powerful demon river universe." It wasn't only the black-yellow universe that had the bloodline of the great demon ancestor. Many universes had the bloodline of the great demon ancestor. I see. Yi Chen understood. In the black-yellow universe, the bloodline of the great demon ancestor was indeed a very powerful bloodline. However, in the demon god palace of the heaven realm, the bloodline of the great demon ancestor was only the most basic quality. If the first demon ancestor came to the heaven realm, he should have joined the demon god palace. This sky demon saint was very powerful. He was a high-level battle saint himself, and he had comprehended the darkness law and wind law. His realm was very high, much higher than even Sweet Dew Sword Saint. His divine power was even more frightening. His will and domain seemed to have reached perfection, transforming into divine power that was not inferior to Yi Chen's divine power. Most importantly, he had comprehended a mid-level divine skill. Fortunately, this mid-level divine skill was not perfected yet. Otherwise, Yi Chen would not be his opponent. The two fought for a day and a night, but there was still no winner. Demon Saint's advantage was that he had cultivated for a long time. Yi Chen's advantage was that he had comprehended the complementary 5 elements. Their advantages canceled each other out. Demon Saint, I hope to see you again next time. Yi Chen did not want to fight anymore. After millions of years, he had accumulated a lot of power of the 5 elements. However, he did not want to waste it on a battle that he could not win. Don't go. Demon Saint chased after him. Unfortunately, Yi Chen's speed was much faster than his opponent. In a short while, he had left his opponent far behind. There were battles everywhere on the Twilight Plains. There were one-on-one fights, group fights, and even small-scale battles between gods. Everywhere was filled with the smoke of battle. 100,000 years had passed, and Yi Chen's battle achievements were bountiful. He had killed over 100 enemy intermediate battle saints and 7 advanced battle saints, earning over 10 billion contribution points. On this day, Yi Chen discovered a Godstone pit. The reason why he discovered it was because when he was fighting against an enemy advanced level battle saint, the aftermath of the battle had lifted up the ground and exposed the Godstone pit. With a burst of strength, Yi Chen killed his opponent and occupied the Godstone pit for himself. 11,000 paragons. A smile appeared on Yi Chen's face. This trip to the Twilight Plains had been worth it. Not only had he obtained tens of billions of contribution points, but he had also obtained so many divine stones. Compared to the former, the latter was clearly more valuable. Before coming to the Twilight Plains, Yi Chen had exchanged for a total of 10,000 9-star Earth Saint swords. A single 9-star Earth Saint sword required more than 5,000 contribution points, so 10,000 swords were only around 50 million. This was nothing to the current Yi Chun. After choosing 1,000 9-star Earth Saint swords, Yi Chun began to fuse them with the parangons. The result was not bad. After spending around 9,000 parangons, Yi Chun obtained 15 3-star Heaven Saint swords. Originally, he had 3 swords, but now he had a total of 18 swords. After spending another 300 parangons, he obtained 3 more 4-star Heaven Saint swords. Now, with the addition of the Firmament sword, Yi Chun had 4 4-star Heaven Saint swords. He was left with around 2,000 parangons. Hopefully, my luck will be better. Yi Chun took a deep breath and tried to fuse the parangons with the Firmament sword. Boom! The Firmament sword suddenly turned transparent, and an intense light burst forth. In the next moment, it exploded with a loud bang. The terrifying shockwave sent Yi Chun flying. Fortunately, Yi Chun's current strength was not the same as before. Under the protection of the divine force, he didn't suffer any injuries. What a pity! Yi Chun felt very regretful. The Firmament sword had accompanied him for millions of years, and his feelings for it were rather deep. Now, it had exploded just like that, and not even a fragment could be found. Since even the Firmament sword was gone, Yi Chun didn't feel any pity for the 3 remaining 4-star Heaven Saint swords. He didn't hesitate to fuse the parangons with the parangons. Boom! The second 4-star Heaven Saint sword exploded. Then it was the 3rd sword. It was unknown if the quality of this 4-star Heaven Saint sword was indeed very good, surpassing the Firmament sword. The moment the parangons fused with the parangons, the sword emitted an astonishing radiance. This radiance wasn't the intense light of an explosion, but an extremely dazzling radiance. The power of laws interweaved with each other, and it was extremely hair-raising. No wonder. It actually contains the fragments of the 5 laws of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Yi Chun was very surprised. He didn't pay much attention to this sword before, but now that he looked deeper into it, he realized that the source of this sword contained the fragments of the 5 laws of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. It was rather perfect and formed a cycle. Yi Chun didn't know that demigods and Heaven Saint weapons were divided into different levels. Demigods who comprehended the complementary laws were elites among demigods. Heaven Saint weapons that contained the complementary laws were elite Heaven Saint weapons. I'll call you 5-element sword. Since it contained the fragments of the 5 laws of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, it was much easier to give it a name. In for a penny, in for a pound. Yi Chun planned to upgrade the 5-element sword to the 6-star grade. With the quality of the 5-element sword, the success rate was very high. Yi Chun forcefully spat out a mouthful of turbid air and continued to fuse. The result made Yi Chun pleasantly surprised. The 5-element sword successfully upgraded to the 6-star grade. The process was rather smooth. What about the 7-star? Yi Chun felt that it was highly possible. A terrifying 5-colored light burst out, and the laws of the 5 elements intertwined. In Yi Chun's eyes, the 5-element sword suddenly rose to the 7-star grade. It was rather heavy in his hand, and it felt like he could split a primordial divine mountain in half. Break! With a low roar, Yi Chun slashed the ground in front of him. Gotcha! A blue-colored sword light burst out, and a pitch-black hole appeared on the ground. The hole kept expanding and extended crazily, forming a small canyon. The hole that was closer to Yi Chun was narrow and deep, and the further away from Yi Chun, the shallower the hole was. However, the width of the hole had increased by 1,000 times. It should be comparable to an 8-star Heaven Saint treasure sword, or even a 9-star. Yi Chun's face revealed a joyful expression. Although the 5-element sword was a 7-star Heaven Saint treasure sword, it contained the fragments of the laws of the 5 elements. When combined with the laws of the 5 elements that Yi Chun had, the power it could display was very terrifying. It definitely surpassed the 7-star Heaven Saint treasure. After all, Yi Chun was also someone who had seen a 7-star Heaven Saint treasure sword. He had even seen a 9-star Heaven Saint treasure sword before. There were many sword saints in the Sword God Palace who had a 9-star Heaven Saint treasure sword. This is a pleasant surprise. After losing the Firmament sword and obtaining the 5-element sword, Yichen didn't know whether he should be happy or worried. It should be both. Yichen estimated that his strength had increased by a small level. If he encountered the Sky Demon Saint again, he might not be able to do anything to him, but he could at least suppress him. Chapter 1475. Time passed by quickly. In the 3,600,000th year, Yichen had comprehended the first 50 elementary divine skills. In the 5 millionth year, Yichen had comprehended the first 100 elementary divine skills. In the 5,500,000th year, Yichen had comprehended the 1 millionth elementary divine skill. In the 6 millionth year, Yichen had comprehended the 1,100,000th elementary divine skill. In the 8 millionth year, Yichen had comprehended the first 150 elementary divine skills. In the 10 millionth year, Yichen had comprehended the first 200 elementary divine skills. In the 111 millionth year, Yichen had comprehended the 1,172nd elementary divine skill, Sword Heart. This elementary divine skill was the last of the elementary divine skills, and it was also the most powerful one. Next, I could try to comprehend a mid-grade divine skill. Even the weakest mid-grade divine skill was still a mid-grade divine skill. Its power was not something a low-grade divine skill could compare to. After all these years, Yichen had already passed the 29th level of the Sword God Pagoda. He was only 3 levels away from becoming an ultimate sword sage. If he could comprehend a mid-grade divine skill, he might be able to pass the 30th level of the Sword God Pagoda, and his power would increase greatly. Of course, he was able to pass the 29th level not only because he had comprehended the last elementary divine skill, Sword Heart. It was also because after countless years, Yichen's nomological realm had improved a lot. The 5-elemental nomological realm was already close to phenomenal success. Once it reached phenomenal success, he would only be a step away from perfection. Furthermore, as the 5-elemental nomological realm improved, Yichen discovered that the quality of the 5 elemental swords was also improving. The 5-elemental nomological fragments inside were gradually becoming stronger. As it turned out, Yichen often imbued the 5-elemental nomological laws into the 5 elemental swords, causing the 5 elemental swords to form a direct connection with Yichen. As Yichen's 5-elemental nomological realm improved, the quality of the 5 elemental swords would also improve. Sensing that the 5 elemental swords could be upgraded to the 8-star level, Yichen did not think too much and imbued 10 divine stones into it. In the end, the 5-element sword was successfully upgraded to 8 stars, and it was only 1 step away from becoming a 9-star Sky Saint artifact. In the 13 millionth year, Yichen had comprehended the first 250 primary godly skills. At this point, in terms of a number of primary godly skills that he had comprehended, Yichen was not inferior to Sword Saint Snowheart. Of course, Sword Saint Snowheart did not comprehend primary godly skills in order. Sword Saint Snowheart had also comprehended many of the lower-ranked primary godly skills. In the 150 million years, Yichen finally comprehended his first intermediate divine skill. The first intermediate divine skill, Thousand Eyes. Green Lotus Island. The Radiant Star Sword Sage, the Pilcloud Sword Sage, the Sweet Dew Sword Sage, and the Shadowless Sword Sage had all arrived. They had already become good friends, often drinking, chatting, and sparring with each other. Green Lotus Sword Saint, I, the Shadowless Sword Saint, rarely admire people, but you are the one I admire. In just a short 10 million years, you have become the strongest amongst us, and even far surpassed us. I can't help but admire you. The Shadowless Sword Saint sighed with emotion. Hearing this, the Sweet Dew Sword Saint nodded. The Shadowless Sword Saint is right. There are 3 people in the Sword God Palace that I admire the most. One is the Idealistic Sword Saint. The second is the Peerless Sword Saint. And the third is you. In comparison, the Idealistic Sword Saint and the Peerless Sword Saint are unable to reach your level in 10 million years. Yi Chen's monstrous level was simply shocking. Comprehending divine skills was as easy as eating and drinking. Among intermediate sword saints, there were very few who had comprehended more than 30 primary godly skills. Among advanced sword saints, there were very few who had comprehended more than 100 primary godly skills. However, Yi Chen had comprehended nearly 300 primary godly skills. It was truly admirable. I think Green Lotus Sword Saint might be able to break the record of the Sword God Palace and become the ultimate sword saint in the shortest time possible. The Bright Star Sword Saint smiled. It's highly possible. The Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint nodded. Yi Chen smiled. Everyone, you're too kind. I merely put all my effort into it. There's nothing else. Yi Chen did not pretend to be modest. It was true that he rarely paid attention to things that were unrelated to him. His life was very simple, and that was to constantly work hard to become stronger. Although the four of them held him in high esteem, he himself was not very satisfied. This was because he did not pass the 30th level of the Sword God Pagoda, even though he had comprehended the first intermediate godly skill, Thousand Eyes. The later levels of the Sword God Pagoda could be said to be abnormal. Passing each level was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. It did not mean that one would be able to smoothly pass through the levels with just a little bit of improvement. One had to improve tremendously and have a qualitative breakthrough. In the 16th million year, Yi Chen's sword domain broke through to the 9th level of perfection. The divine power it transformed into was even stronger. It was no longer inferior to the divine power of an ultimate sword saint. After all, ultimate sword saints did not have 3 supreme sword intents. As the sword domain broke through to the 9th level of perfection, Yi Chen successfully passed through the 30th level of the Sword God Pagoda. He was only 2 levels away from becoming an ultimate sword saint. In the 17th million year, Yi Chen comprehended the 5th intermediate godly skill, Flourish. In the 20th million year, a godly battle erupted between the Sword God Deity branch's Beast God and the Demonic God Deity branch's Demonic Beast God. In the Myriad Beast battlefield, this was in planar battlefield jointly opened up by the Beast God and the Demonic Beast God. The battlefield was vast and boundless. At this moment, there were tens of millions of battle sages fighting on the battlefield. Tens of thousands of battle sages were dying every moment. A godly battle was extremely tragic. Under normal circumstances, after a long and drawn-out godly battle, more than half of the battle sages on both sides would die. Hence, unless it was absolutely necessary, a godly battle would not break out easily. Once it did, it would be a battle to the death. As a member of the Beast God Valley, Su Jing naturally had to participate in the battle. In the past 20 million years, she had also improved greatly. Unfortunately, in the Myriad Beast battlefield, she was still an ordinary member. She could be killed at any time. Yi Chen also participated in this godly battle. He had to participate. Otherwise, it was very likely that Su Jing would die on the battlefield. Puff, puff, puff. It was as if 1,000 eyes blinked in the sky. Dozens of demonic Beast Mountain battle sages were killed. This was the first intermediate godly skill, Thousand Eyes. The moment 1,000 eyes appeared, it was as if the Grim Reaper had opened 1,000 eyes. It's the Sword Saint of the Sword God Palace. Everyone, follow me to kill him. Yi Chen's strength attracted countless attacks. The Sword Saint of the Sword God Palace was very famous in the Heaven Domain. In terms of combat strength, if the Sword Saint of the Sword God Palace claimed to be the second strongest, no one would dare to claim to be the first. Of course, this was under the condition that their foundations were similar. Otherwise, even Yi Chen would not be able to withstand an ultimate battle sage. Boom, boom, boom. At least 100 intermediate and advanced battle sages joined forces to attack Yi Chen. Flourish. The moment the 5 elements sword appeared, the void seemed to have become a kaleidoscope. Everything was twisted, folded, and shattered. Blood dyed the sky red. Over 100 enemy battle sages had died. Sword Saint of the Sword God Palace, die for me. Right at this time, a huge hammer smashed over from afar. This hammer was only a few meters long and was connected to a chain. However, When the hammer smashed over 1,000 battle sages of the Beast God Valley were smashed into meat paste. The might of this hammer was so great that it was terrifying to the extreme. Ultimate Battle Sage. Yichen narrowed his eyes. This was the first time he faced an ultimate battle sage head-on. Everyone retreat. Saying so, Yichen stood in front of them.